Good evening, everybody. How you doing tonight? Steve Stockton here. Welcome to our Campfire Stories stream. Thought we'd do something live tonight. We tested the stream out the other night. I had the campfire and the crickets and things going in the background, and a lot of people were saying they found it relaxing, so I just made a stream out of that, and we left it up. And then last night I did a rain stream. And I've had several people asking, what's going on with all these weird streams? And I just figured, people are home, nothing to do. I know people have been having stress and anxiety and having trouble sleeping and things, so thought, the campfire and crickets, maybe rain. The rain puts me to sleep. When I have that stream on, I have to mute it in my headphones or I'll sit here and fall asleep at my desk. Say hi to some people in the chat here. Joanna Thompson, sorry if I butchered your name. Good to see you. Jose, good to see you, buddy. Fangirl 98. Jim Ingfer. Vez, good to see you back. Glad you're here. Well, everybody welcome. Come on in. I may not get to say hi to everybody here, but yeah, we're going to tell some stories for you tonight, and most of it will be read or told live. I've got some pre-recorded things I may play, just depending on how long we run. Let me know in the chat there if you can hear me okay, if the audio sounds good. And then especially after I bring my guest on, she's in the chat there, Journey Through the Gate, a paranormal portal. I'll bring her out in just a minute. Hello from Manchester, England. Hey there. Looks like Paul. Okay, looks like you can hear me okay. Let me go ahead and bring my guest on. Give her just a little introduction here before I make her mic hot. And my tires were slashed and I almost crashed, but the Lord had mercy. And my machine, she's a dud, out stuck in the mud, somewhere in the swamps of Jersey. Well, my special guest tonight, she's not a dud, and she's probably not stuck in the mud. I don't even think she's in the swamps of Jersey, but she sent me some pictures today, and she's on the totally desolate beaches of Jersey walking her cat. Welcome, author, raconteuse, storyteller extraordinaire, Sysco Murdoch. Sysco, how you doing tonight?
What is up, my social distance friends? How y'all doing?
Let me know if you can hear Sysco okay in the chat, and make sure that there's no
y'all
echo.
Give me a 5-5? Y'all give me a 5-5 out there if it's
I don't change the settings on this thing from one stream to the next, but somehow it'll change itself, and I'll wind up with some weird echoey thing. I've had it go in the middle of the stream before where it just all of a sudden will start echoing. So just let me know, give me a thumbs up, or hey Steve or whatever, let me know that you can hear us okay.
Am I sounding loud and clear to you, Steve? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear Sysco okay. They said you sound good. All right, I guess we're ready to go there. Yeah, I didn't know
Jose says
Springsteen lyrics off the top of my head to introduce you with, but no, one of the favorite sons from there where you are.
Yeah. Well, my husband actually played with him.
Yeah,
way back in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in a place called the Upstage. It was above an old Tom McCann shoe store, downtown Asbury Park, Main Street. And you go up 3 floors, and that's where everybody would gather and play instruments. And they had this big, they call it the Wall of Sound, and everybody would bring old amps and stuff. They wired them all together, and it was like going to I want to say like a metal concert or something, because they just had all the Marshalls and stuff.
And that would have been in the days even before the Stone Pony and some of those places that he's famous for. I'm not a big Springsteen fan. I'm just a trivia buff, and I have all this stuck in my head. I'm a good person to have on your team if you play Trivial Pursuit.
It was back in the mid to late 60s, because they played together a couple of years before the riots, and the riots from 68. They actually, my husband was on I'll tell you a quick story. It's scary, but it's not a ghost story. They were upstairs playing, and there's a bunch of people gathered, some just to listen and some to play and just jam, And Springsteen was part of it. My husband played keyboards. And they had this bouncer, and this bouncer was close to, I think he was about 6'5", 6'6". He was always barefoot. It's funny. And they were all outside smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden you hear this pop, 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 pop. And somebody turned and said, man, somebody's shooting off fireworks. And the bouncer guy, I won't say his name, but he looked down the street and goes, hold on, man, that's not fireworks. Somebody's shooting. And this big old guy grabs my husband, who was a skinny little thing at that time, and so was Springsteen. He grabbed my husband under one arm and Springsteen up the other and ran him up 2 flights of stairs. and they spent 3 days during the riots in Asbury Park on that roof, crawling in and out of apartment windows to try to get, plate of spaghetti or something like that. Couldn't come down. It was bad. It was bad.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Got some other New Jersey folks joining us here in the chat. Looks like we've got Joe from Long Beach Island, New Jersey. And I'm not even going to attempt that name. It looks like Baby Abby, Hunting for the Truth. She's there from Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Nice.
Arizona, JJK, Newport, Rhode Island. Got a good mix in the house tonight. Glad to see you all here.
Welcome in, neighbors.
So hope everybody's doing okay, keeping 6 feet apart out there. And I actually got out in the sunshine today. I don't get out of the house much anyway. I'm a hermit by choice, and this is nothing new to me. This is just another reason to not go outside if I don't absolutely have to. So I'm kind of enjoying it. But I did get out today. There's some sunshine. Took Melder, my dog, out, and we wandered around in the yard, and actually went barefoot. I think I like to ground myself every now and then like that, get out there and just feel the earth under my toes, so.
Right.
I thought the next best thing we could do would be to have a virtual campfire, so that's what we're doing tonight. Hopefully the crackling's not too loud there. The crickets, had an issue with the cricket. A lot of people hated the cricket the other night when I ran the just the relaxation streams. People were like, shut that cricket up. Interesting thing about that, and this is something that my dad taught me. If you can isolate one cricket and listen to him, you can count the number of chirps per minute, and it'll tell you what the temperature is. And I thought that was just an old wives' tale or folklore or something like that. But I've tested it, and I can't think of the formula off the top of my head, but it's accurate to within a degree or two, which is amazing, I thought. Yeah, John, the Mulder, like from the X-Files. Yeah, I had Mulder, my dog, and then I had a cat named Scully. But my daughter took Scully with her when she moved out. So it's just me and Mr. Mulder out here now in the Pacific Northwest. We'll go ahead and get started here. Got my candles lit, got my cup of coffee. Hope you guys have some s'mores or popcorn or whatever you have there, whatever you're drinking. Just wanted to give a shout out to my friend Amy over at the Silverbridge Coffee Company in, I'm probably not going to say this right, Gallipolis, Ohio. They sent me a bag of their Mothman blend, and this is some really amazing coffee. I'm getting a charge out of it. It's a dark roast, really smooth coffee. If you like cryptids and you like coffee, go check out silverbridgecoffee.com. It's a female-owned and operated business. They use fair trade coffees from female growers. Really, really nice people over there. And going to have a promotion coming up with them in the future. I'm going to do an episode on the Mothman, and we've got a little fun tie-in there for you folks. So that's coming up. Somebody else here from Oregon. Hello, Tony. I'm just northwest Portland myself. And let's see, we got Jeffrey from Key West. A lot of people coming in here tonight. 54 listening right now. We can probably go ahead and get started with the storytelling. And you guys are in for a treat tonight. Sysco said she's a master storyteller, knows all kinds of ghost stories and creepy stories and spooky things. She wrote a book that I helped her co-author. We're All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a haunted tour. No, wait, a guided tour through a haunted life. I screw that title up every time because it's such a mouthful. But you can get that in paperback and Kindle edition on Amazon.com. Got a couple more people coming in. Hello, MAGA Kitten from Idaho, and Tater K from California, John Kilduff from Ireland, Quentin Gibb, Washington, Jackie M, Ontario, Canada. Wow, it's got a nice mix of people here. Good to see everybody here. But Sysco, I'll let you get started there with whatever you want to tell us first, and then after you're
well,
done.
gee, yeah. See, I don't know. I mean, I know so many off the top of my head, but to get the ball rolling, maybe they could tell us. You want to hear something, a historical one, or now? See, Steve is very much into the lore. We've had multiple shows on my podcast as well. Journey Through the Gate. You can see it there in my moniker. But we've talked about monsters and werewolves and Frankenstein and cryptids and Bigfoots and stuff like that. You know, I think about campfires, and I think about all the bonfires we used to have. I lived in Alabama when I got out of the Army. And some of the best things were around that bonfire, like a powwows and the things that, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a powwow. They're a little different in the South than they are up north here. But it's just amazing to go and stay for days, because usually people will be there for like at the minimum 3 to 5 days and camp out. And after everybody leaves during the day, of course, there's the dancing around the circle, and there's all the shops and, you know, the artistry of Native Americans, the beadwork and the bows and all that stuff. But afterwards, you're sitting around the fire, and the stories that you hear are just absolutely amazing. And one of the things that really got my skin crawling was this one guy was sitting there, and I think he was marrying into one of the girls from the tribe that was given the powwow, and he was really trying to learn, and he wanted to get into more of the mysteries of it all, not just the traditions, but the mystic stuff around Native American traditions. And he kept saying, well, what about this? And what about that? You know, what about, you know, skinwalkers and, Winnebagos and just everything. He was naming off stuff. And one of the elders looked at him, and he held up his finger, and he said, stop. And the guy just looked at him. He sat back, and his eyes got real big, because when this elder spoke, you listened. And he took a kind of an old, wrinkled, bony finger, and he waved it back and forth, and he said, we do not speak of such things, because when you speak of them, they hear you. And everything just got quiet. And there is an awful lot of truth to that, because you talk about, if you ever talk about the energy, like connecting into the energy of a loved one, say, you know, you're thinking about them and they've passed over. And if you've ever, heard, that's when you'll see some stuff happening. Or if you get a chance to talk to somebody like a medium or a psychic or something along those lines, and they'll say, remember that day you were sitting there, or you were saying this or singing this song? They heard you because you were speaking to them and you connect into that energy. So what's so different about something that would be either of this dimension or other dimensions, that if you connect it into energy, they hear you. So I wanted to say that straight out, because that's what the whole campfire thing reminded me of. And they tell you that if you are walking on a path, or you're told to stay on a path, or you're told to not go in a certain part of land, don't do it. And Steve and I have talked multiple times about land, as devils in the name, basically. If you look up a certain land and it has a Native American name, and you think, oh my gosh, that's so quaint, and then you look it up and you find out, everybody dies here. That's what it means, And I know you've got some stories there. If you go ahead and tell a little bit about that. I've got something I wanted to look up here that I wanted to tell. It was a little more of one of my favorite historic ghost stories. If you give me just a second, I'll pull it up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that we've talked a lot about that. I'm part Cherokee, and that's part of our tradition as well. You know, there's certain things that the elders will warn you not to talk about. And I know after my experience with the black-eyed children that I had back in the 90s, I was reticent to talk about that just for fear of that it'd come back, that giving into it and giving that energy to it, that you can cause things to manifest. And it's the same with a lot of the Wendigo, the Skinwalker, Spearfinger, the Raven Mockers, all those Cherokee legends. A lot of the elders won't talk about that. The Raven Mockers in particular is one that they just, they don't want to hear that. They'll put you out of wherever you're at talking that kind of stuff because,
Yep.
again, they're afraid it'll come to them. And there's one of my favorite stories is about Walter Gibson, the man who wrote the Shadow stories, and those were back in the pulp fiction days in the pulp magazines, and then it was also a radio show like in the 40s, I think.
Yep.
And he wrote hundreds and hundreds of stories and radio episodes, and it got to the point where he would have people over for dinner, and they would see a shadow of Lamont Cranston, a shade or a figure of a man with a slouch hat and a trench coat and a scarf, the way that he had described the shadow. There's like, who's the person? Today they would say, who's cosplaying the shadow? And he would tell them, no. He's like, I see it sometimes too. It, flits around the corner. And he basically arrived at the idea that it was a tulpa that he had created by all the blood, sweat, and tears he'd put into those manuscripts, that it had somehow caused this figure to at least partially manifest in real life, and people would see it in his apartment in New York. So I think there's some credence to that. Years ago, I think it was the University of North Carolina did a study where they tried to create like a spirit being, and they decided what it would look like and how it would act and things like that, and they were actually able to manifest some paranormal events that they thought was, well, did we conjure something? Did we create something with our minds that came to life? So it's interesting. They had a parapsychology study there at the university, so who knows? But something to think about. So be careful what you talk about. I've heard that you have what you confess, you have what you speak. So careful what you confess or speak to yourself, because that might be what you get.
Absolutely true. And one of the things too we talked about, we go through the woods, and not just the land can be cursed. The land absorbs energy as well. All this has to do with energy, believe it or not. And when that absorbs, like when I went to Gettysburg at Devil's Den, and I would just sit on the rocks there and close my eyes and palms down on the rock, and it was almost like they were talking. You could see flashes of pictures of stuff you don't want to see. You know what I mean? They were very fast and they were flashes, but sometimes it was screaming, and sometimes you could just hear like the cannon fire. And then I'd go to a place like beautiful Montesano Mountain in Alabama, and sit near a waterfall and do the same thing. And I could almost feel like native people there by the lake, gathering stuff with a net, or trying to catch fish with like a sharpened, like a spear, but it was more like a stick. And then it would flash to the next thing. So many things happened by the water, so it was almost like a generational thing. So if rocks remember and the land remembers, you imagine what the land is like and what it absorbs if it was in a battle, or if there was a massacre there, or some other horrible thing happened. So I guess some soil is just sour as well. There's just places that are just bad, and they know there's places where no grass will grow or nothing living will go near it. There's plenty of places that around the world, and there's quite a few of those here in New Jersey, believe it or not, where battles were and mounds were, where Native Americans just won't have anything to do with. And then, like I said, they'll put up a hotel and name it that. And I was like, you don't even know what that means. It's not good. It sounds quaint, but it's not good. So,
and like you're talking about the devil names and things like that.
Yes.
There's a little town across the river in Washington State that I just happened to pass through. And immediately when I went into the town, it's called Yakult, Y-A-C-O-L-T, but it's pronounced Yakult, Washington. And I just got the weirdest feeling. It started out as kind of a deja vu, and then it just continued. I got the heebie-jeebies, got the hair standing up. And I thought, there's just something off about this place. And the cell phone provider I had at the time, I couldn't get a signal there. So after I'd passed through there and got back out to where I could get a signal, I looked it up. And I can't remember the name of the tribe from that area, but Yakult was one of their words, and it means Valley of the Fire Demon. And it's interesting because they've had a lot of unexplained fires there in recent years. There was a thing around the turn of last century called the Yakult Burn, which I think was the biggest forest fire in Washington State that just happened for no reason, and it happened in the Valley of the Fire Demon. And there's stories of missing kids there that go back even to native times. There was somebody kind of like their version of the Pied Piper trope, where somebody came through and led all the kids out of the village, and they never saw them again. And then the more I researched that place, there was a little restaurant there across from the old train depot. I think it's called the Whistle Stop Cafe, and it's haunted. I'd gone in there and I talked to the owner, and I'd ordered some food. While I was waiting on my food, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands, and as I started to go out, and I don't know why I did this because it was very atypical of something I would do, but I flicked the lights out and then took a hold of the door handle. Well, the door wouldn't budge, and I'm trying to turn it and pull it on it, and I hear kids giggling. And I thought, okay, well, some kid's holding the door on me. So I yanked it again. It opened right up. I almost took it off the hinges. I yanked it so hard. Didn't see anybody. And I said something to the owner. I said, yeah, your kids are having a laugh. They were holding me in the bathroom. And she said, oh, you've met our ghosts. And I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, there's ghost children here. She said, I hear them giggling and running up and down the stairs at night. They live in the restaurant in the apartment above the restaurant. And there's a spook light there. There's a phantom train. Just all these things concentrated in this one little area. Found a girl on Facebook that had actually grown up there and talked to her. And she remembered when she was going to elementary school, there was a shortcut she could take through this expansive field to get home. But when she did that, she said these tiny little Native American braves with bows and arrows, she said they're about 2 or 3 feet tall, would chase her through the field. So, but there's definitely something there, and that's one I'm looking into. I'm doing some research, and I plan to go back there in the future and find out more about Yakult, Washington. But yeah, there's a lot of places like that, just little communities that you never heard of, you don't think about. But if you stop and talk to some of the locals, and it's usually either the teenagers or the really elderly people, they know all the legends, they know all the stories, they know the haunted spots and things. And that's what I enjoy, is going out and finding these people, and just finding what's up in a certain area.
Exactly. And, different places. You said train, so you know what you caused. Just as soon as he said train, I started thinking of all these things. I've got 2 that I just absolutely love, and that's when we're talking ghost stories. I've always wondered, what in the world with these ghost ships and ghost trains and ghost planes? Because you figure, inanimate object, it doesn't have a soul, so what's up there? I mean, we can almost accept that somebody, an essence of a human being can come back and, and is still a part of that, that living human being, what we remember. But how can something like a train? And Steve and I have talked too about many times about the Lincoln train, the Phantom train.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Phantom trains to read about, the Abraham Lincoln funeral train. Man. Yep,
and it'll go through to take the whole path. I don't know if y'all know this, but when Lincoln, actually it was himself, his coffin, and his son's, because he had died not too long before. So they were both on that train. And they draped it with all the, what do you call it, the bunting that we now have, you know, like the 4th of July when you put it underneath your windows, that red, white, and blue, it's called bunting. That was all around the train. And people will hear the train. Sometimes at night they'll see the light and hear the train and just hear it as it goes by and not see it. And some will see it and it has no sound at all. And it has that bunting. And it usually goes through almost every little town, and that it went on its trail from, was it Washington to Illinois, wasn't it?
Yeah, it went from D.C. to Springfield, I think. And they've seen different versions of it. There's some where the casket's on like a flat car with nothing around it, and there's a skeleton driving the locomotive. So it's very creepy, and there's a whole book about that specific, the sightings, different sightings of the Lincoln funeral train. That's one of my favorite Phantom Train stories. And somebody asked in the chat about my black-eyed kids encounter. I think it's Johanna. Johanna, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Actually, I've played that on these relaxation streams. People want to hear some stories. I played it last night and the night before. I'll play it again later tonight if you want to stick around after Sysco.
Yeah, let me get out of here before you tell that, because every time he tells that story, there's a knock on my door, and one day something bad's going to happen in this house.
I have strange things happen when I actually tell it. It doesn't seem to be as prominent when I play the recorded version, but I'll do that toward the end of the stream, just for Sysco's sake.
It's the end.
And I talk about that. It's an interview that Tanya Jones did with me about it, and I talk about that every time I tell. The first time I told that story, I was on the Art Bell show. And that night early morning after I tried to go to bed, I heard a screaming. It sounded like it started out on the front porch, went all the way through the house and out the back of the house. And I had motion detectors, security cameras, perimeter alarms, all this. None of that went off. But I know what I heard. I've had knockings. I've had pictures fall off the wall. Other stuff, particular to when I tell that story. So I'm still a little hesitant. But it doesn't seem to be as bad.
There's something about when you tell it when you're on the air with me, though, every single time. And the last time you told it, I started with a 98% on my cell phone. I had 2 laptops going, and just like right now, I've got 2 laptops. I got the mixer, I got everything going here. I got 2 candles, sitting in my studio. And then all of a sudden, about the second sentence in, I think everything. First the laptops went out, and my phone drained.
It killed everything. But we've had that happen on other shows. We were on Where Did the Road Go? A great paranormal show with Soraya Askath out of WVBR FM in Ithaca, New York. And he lost control of his whole studio. They're an actual commercial radio, terrestrial radio station. And he just let us go. And I think we ran, about 2 or 3 hours before we noticed, hey, where'd Soraya go? And he could hear us, but he couldn't talk to us, and he couldn't... everything was recording, but it was frozen. He'd lost control of everything. Yeah. So toward the end of that episode, you can hear it's like, did he fall asleep? Where'd he go? What happened?
Craziness. It's crazy. Well, see, yeah. And the first time, I think, when you told it, and then it was wee hours in the morning because you're doing a show, and you told the story. And then somewhere around 6:30 in the morning, there's a knock on my door. And I mean what I would call a cop knock, boom, 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 boom. And what in the world? And I go to open the door because I got up. I shot out, down the hallway because what do you figure? Somebody knocks like that on, the house on fire? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And right before I opened it, I had a feeling. And I started singing Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog. Because remember, I told you I would always do that to lift the vibration because apparently they can't be around that happy vibration.
Little 3 Dog Night there to keep the black-eyed kids away.
3 dogs in the night, man. And I opened the door, nobody was there. So, yeah. But right now, I'm sitting, like I said, I'm sitting in my studio in the dark. I'm absolutely surrounded by glass windows and patio doors and a dark woods. So yeah, please don't.
Maybe there's black-eyed kids peering in at you there.
If there's somebody out there, I can't see them, so it's good.
Another time, I don't know which show it was on, but another time I told it, I had that same thing. I had big booming knocks at the door, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And again, security, system, cameras, alarms, nothing went off, but somebody pounded on my door 3 times. And I was awake. I was up and working on something, and boom, boom, boom. What's that? And I can't explain it other than I'm not supposed to talk too much about it.
Right. Yeah. Now I'm looking out the windows. I can't see nothing. I see the moon through the trees. I mean, how much creepier can you get, right? But anyway, we were talking about the Lincoln train, and I don't know why, but he's always been one of my favorite presidents. I mean, I guess if we lived in those times, we might have thought one or the other, because word was hard to get out. But I think, I don't know if anybody's ever asked if you could, go back in time and sit down and, have a beer with like 10 people from the past. He would definitely be one of my top 3. I'd love to talk to Lincoln. And he just seemed to have such a, just a way about him. The way he spoke, he was a sarcastic son of a gun too. And I just love that, a wisecracker, but with a lot of, smarts behind it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Very much like Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was the same way. That's why I love him so much. But anyway, I just had this little story. I always thought it was always been one of my favorite little ghost stories. It didn't happen to me. And I just thought I'd share it in case anybody hadn't heard it. I don't know if anybody's heard the latest that's happened within the past year of the White House. And they took some pictures. Actually, excuse me, that's wrong. It's latest about the White House, but it's an old picture. And it was a picture that, who was it? Eisenhower that tore it up and did a lot of renovations. It was, wasn't it?
I think so.
I believe it was. And while they had a lot of that torn up, because people don't realize that White House, there's very little of the original White House there. It's actually buried mostly, what parts they didn't sell off is buried in a baseball field about a mile away underneath of it. So when you walk through the halls of that, you go, oh, well, Jefferson walked. No, he didn't. There's very little of the original White House left. But in that picture, it was almost like a panoramic. Now, if you remember how they used to take pictures back then, they had the cameras where you had to stay still. They were on tripods. And if you moved, it would be very blurry. So everybody had to stand there for a few minutes. You know what I'm talking about, those old photographs? Mm-hmm. And there's a photo of what they think could be Abraham Lincoln standing off to the side with the top hat and the whole spiel. And that started everybody talking about it. It was about 8 months ago. And it reminded me again of this story, so I thought I would just share it. The White House's most famous alleged apparition is that of Abraham Lincoln. And if anybody remembers ever seeing a photograph, it was taken by a photographer named Mumbler. Now, this isn't the photograph I was telling you about earlier. This is a different one. And it apparently shows Mary Todd Lincoln with the ghost of her husband, Abraham Lincoln, standing right behind her. And that has gone around and round and round, and nobody can debunk it. You've heard sometimes maybe that has been debunked, but I can tell you, knowing several people that work for the Black Vault that take pictures like this of UFOs and cryptids and analyze it, forensic photography, and whatever you call it, they can't debunk it. So anyway, that's one. Now, he's been seen all through there, and of course you've all heard that he had many premonitions of his death and the war and all kinds of other things before. I don't know if you ever heard of the dream he had not long before he was shot at Ford's Theater. And he woke from in the dream. It was like he was sleeping. He got up and he heard crying. And he opened his bedroom door and he walked down the hall and into the larger part of the White House. And there was a coffin there. People were crying. And he asked a woman who lay in that coffin, said, "This is the president. He has been shot." And he woke up. And that was just days before he was shot. So there's lots of stuff around Abraham Lincoln. He must have had some kind of abilities, huh? But this one here is my favorite. And there's plenty. Eleanor Roosevelt saw him. Her dog used to bark at him all the time. Dwight Eisenhower's press secretary. I mean, so many people. There's just a list of Lady Bird Johnson. They all saw him at one point or another, usually standing in the back of a party or a gathering that they were having, a social event. But two of my absolute favorites with him is when Winston Churchill, who is the British Prime Minister, came and stayed at the White House. Now, he loved to stay up late and take a long hot bath while drinking scotch and smoking a cigar just to relax. And there is an account on one occasion that he climbed out of the bath naked, but for his cigar, and walked into the adjoining bedroom. And he was startled to see Lincoln, his full apparition, standing by the fireplace in the room, leaning on the mantel. Churchill, always quick on the uptake, simply took his cigar out of his mouth, tapped the ash off the end of the cigar, and said, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage." Lincoln simply smiled, as if laughing, and then disappeared. And Churchill, of course, smiled back in embarrassment. The last one that I know of that happened with that, I just even as an apparition, he's got the, was Lyndon Johnson supposedly encountered Lincoln's apparition during a moment of great distress. President Johnson reportedly spoke to Lincoln out, he was sitting in the Oval Office, and he asked out to the air, Lincoln, how would you have handled this unpopular war? And, of course, that was the Vietnam War. And Lincoln supposedly smiled and said, "Don't go to the theater."
I just put that photo up on the screen. I'll put it back up for a minute. But it's called the Mumbler Photo. That's the one where it looks like the ghost of Lincoln there over Mary Todd's shoulder. And, yeah, I mean, a lot of people try to debunk it and things, but... who knows? I mean, there was a time when there was a lot of fakery around the spirit photography and things like that, but that was more prevalent around the turn of the last century, and in particular right after World War I, when a lot of people were going to these phony mediums and psychics and things and trying to get in touch with their loved ones that had died in that war. But it's an interesting photograph, to say the least. But,
yes.
But my only problem, I guess you'd call it, with it is the way that it's framed. If they were taking a picture of just her, then why wasn't she in the middle of the frame? So they've got her pushed over to one side so there's room for him to stand there. Now, I don't know if that was the intent. If they said, we're going to make him manifest, so slide over this way to give him room. But
make room for the ghost.
That's the Mumbler Photo, but anyway, who knows?
It's a trip.
Who am I to judge? But yeah, there are a lot of things, strange things with Lincoln in general, and then the whole Lincoln-Kennedy parallel. If you've ever studied anything about that, the like backwards similarities there. Yeah,
I mean that's a trip right there. But I think just Lincoln's his whole demeanor and everything. I mean, it's just amazing. And anytime anybody saw him, if of course it's true, he always had that type of attitude. I just dig that kind of attitude. It was just always endearing to me with him,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's some of the historical. Like somebody wrote here in the chat, Lincoln, the friendly ghost. It is kind of, I feel so sorry for him because he was so. If you know me at all, I'm a huge Civil War buff. I've spent a lot of time in Gettysburg and on a lot of the different battlefields around here, all the way to the south and back. Fredericksburg and, the Angel of Marie's Heights and just all of that. It really intrigues me. But I cannot imagine being a president in that time to have to watch that death on your your own soil, your own people, some of his speeches, those were Americans after all. He's up on them, that kind of thing. So it was hard for him, it really was. So if I would imagine he would stay back and try to help if he could, or like all those different presidents in there and trying to give advice and stuff like that. And who knows? Those are the ones we've heard of. Can you imagine all the ones where he might have shown up and nobody ever said anything? So there you go. Right?
Yep.
So if you like, I'll read a little excerpt from my book, or you can tell a story, whatever the chat would like to hear. What would they like to hear? What kind of stories?
They hear enough from me. I'd say let's have you favor us with you reading a selection from your book there. What story are you going to read for us?
Well, I was wondering how the chat feels if we could take kind of a little poll. How many people in the chat has ever used a Ouija board? Raise your hand. Can you raise your hand in the chat? Let's see.
Just they give a thumbs up or...
Yeah, you give a thumbs up or something. Would you use a Ouija board? Have you used them? Do you think that they're, Steve and I have talked about this an awful long, and I'll tell you why we're waiting for people to put in there. I think it's just a board. I think that if you wanted to, you take a Sharpie and write on your kitchen floor and get a glass and do the same thing. I think that it's all about the intent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a gun or a VCR or anything. It's an inanimate object, and it's the intent of the person using it. You can use a gun to defend yourself, or you can use it to commit a crime. You can use a VCR to watch a movie, or you can, illegally record something off TV that you're not supposed to. It's what you do with it, and that odd way to put it there, I guess. Maybe people don't even know what a VCR is, but anyway.
Yeah, I know.
It's one of those things. I believe it's the intent, and I was at a gathering one time where we made a Ouija board. We tore up pieces of paper and wrote the letters and the numbers on them, and had a squashed soda can that we used for planchette, and it worked. So I don't think it's what's in the board. I think it's what's out there, what you're connecting with. But then that's the thing. You don't always know what you're talking to, and you have to know how to close that portal correctly once you open it up, or you can cause problems.
Exactly, and that's the thing. And I'm looking in the chat here, and yes as a child, but never again. You could become a blind channel. Yes, absolutely. And they contaminate the environment. Tell the truth. That's interesting. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I'm seeing a lot of yes, never, would never touch them. Okay, well, this is the reason I asked, because I know, I got to say, you have to understand, I've been doing this about 47 years now, something like that, maybe 48. Seems like I've been saying 47 for a couple of years, so probably longer. But I'm interested in that as well as, to me, I was told, not only by a lot of Native American elders, but a lot of people who are much wiser than I'll ever be, that basically you're asking for the spirit to come through you. You're giving it permission to use you. And, they move the board through you and whoever you're with. Now, what you're drawing in, we said intent, but what you're drawing in not only is what's hanging around and what's going to listen to you if you're saying, hey, is anybody in the room? Is there any spirits around us? That kind of thing. You have to understand what kind of spirits are just kind of waiting around for some teenagers to pull out a hey. You're not going to get a lot of higher vibrational beings that are waiting for something like that to happen. You're going to catch whatever's right there. And if you're drawing in whatever your energy is, say you're depressed, or say you got a lot going on in your life, or any kind of thing like that, energy draws energy. It's going to draw that like energy to you. So that's why it can be very dangerous. And it's also why people can use them and get absolutely nothing. Because if you're a disbeliever and you put up that block and that kind of thing goes up, then it's just going to go off the other person. And you also have to think, you don't have to just worry about the spirits that are around or the entities that are around. You got to worry about who you're on the board with, because you're drawing, it's their energy and yours mixed. So that's a lot to take in. But it doesn't really have much to do with the board. It has to do with more you're giving it permission, you're calling it in, you're opening a door. It's like picking up a phone and dialing a random number, and you don't have a clue who you're talking to. So that's that. So the reason I brought up all that is there is a chapter in my book, and I'm going to go ahead and read that chapter. And it's called Friends Don't Let Friends Ouija. And I got a really early, I believe, warning to not do this. At the time that it was in my life, it was pretty rough. But this actually happened. So give me a second. Let me get the font up here so I can actually see it, and I'll read it to you. Friends don't let friends Ouija. As a young girl growing up and seeing a few things the supernatural and paranormal had to offer, I can tell you that effect stays with you in different ways. I was still on my journey for answers, a road that still winds and twists till this day. I did most of my research in nonfiction books and a few carefully picked shows on TV, in search of and unsolved mysteries being among the few. Having new friends and enjoying being a kid often took you into new territories. I think many of us can look back on our first sleepover parties or slumber camp or summer camp gatherings, where someone brought up a dare to stare in a mirror and repeat some mantra over and over, or call a name out of some lost spirit and they grab you through the mirror or whatever. Nope, not me. I basically would just say, look, I've seen enough to know not to poke the bear here. Be my guest, but I'm so out of this. Now, stiff as a board, light as a feather, maybe. But start summoning up stuff, color me gone. I managed to keep out of the waves of things going around in my time. Information was minimal at best. Rumors were king, and Supernatural got its share of parents who played our record albums backwards to see what messages we were getting from evildoers. How crazy was that? Amityville books, The Exorcist, and Rosemary's Baby were pushing at the envelope of our time and could feel as real as a huge great white shark that could get you just past the breakers. Fear was fear. It wasn't anything new, but people talked about it in hushed tones more now. Not much, but a little more. I didn't know much for someone who studied it as much as I could, but I knew enough to respect it. Oh, sure, I went with like-minded people to see the Greenlight Cemetery out here in New Jersey, or go read tombstones by flashlight, but honestly, it just made me feel sad. Or somebody would wind up turning it into a scream fest, getting back to the car as fast as we could because a stick cracked or an owl hooted in the night. The one time I took a chance at delving deeper into the dark unknown was a normal sunny day at a friend's house. I was around 12, and we were getting out of our pool and looking for something to do. She went in her house and came out with a couple cans of soda and a stack of board games. Reading down the stack of games, their sides with the colorful logos: Monopoly, Life, Connect 4, Ouija, and Battleship. Wait a minute. Go back one. I so remember being as nonchalant as possible, saying, hey, what's that one all about? I knew some, well, as much as reading a book about spiritualism and the like taught me. I leaned more towards believing you could do the same thing writing on a table with a marker and using a glass and achieve the same results, than thinking the board itself had extra powers. The mysterious design and well-picked letter font achieves its goal of creepy and interesting. And I was quickly learning through multiple researchers that it was very much like opening any door into an unknown room. But I wanted to see what she knew about it, and I was all ears. Oh, that one, she answered me, pulling the black and sepia-colored box from the stack. You're supposed to put your fingers on the pushy thing in the middle and ask it questions. talk to spirits. I smiled a bit at this, and she seemed excited. And ever careful about this subject, I asked her if she believed in all that. Yeah, sure. I don't know. Well, that seemed about right. Let's give it a go. Letting her take the lead, it was her game after all, she instructed me on how to put her fingers just so and began thinking of names to call. I do remember George Washington coming up, but honestly, I don't know who we decided on. I can tell you my deepest thought is just perhaps my mom would come through and tell me she was okay, but there was no way I would ever say something so close to me out loud. My friend took the lead, and I used every bit of my 12-year-old wisdom to stay ahead of anything she might try to pull here. I remember even watching the muscles in her forearms to see if they moved at all, proving to me that she was actually moving the planchette around the board. I placed my fingers lightly down on the heart-shaped plastic arrow thing in the center, as she did. And she closed her eyes. "Is there anyone there?" she asked the air in a whispery voice. I watched her hands, and she repeated the same words, holding the last one longer. "There." To my amazement, the planchette made a tiny slide to my right. Of course, we both pulled our hands off and gasped. "You did that." We both said it to each other and both denied it. I know, I didn't do it. My friend then reaffirmed we had to keep our fingers on the plastic disc, no matter what. And we agreed. Settling back on the planchette, moving it back to the center. "You ask it," she said. And I drew in a breath, and I wondered if I should creepy whisper too. I smiled and settled on a phrase, and I had so many times read in the books about the spiritualism era. "Are there any spirits here with us?" I asked. Moving slowly, it went to my right. We held firm, looking at each other and back to the board. Again it moved to the left, settling back where it had started. If anyone said anything here, I have forgotten. It zigged back to the right again, and a bit more. Speed, then a quick zag, right across the board, caught air as it flung right over the water, the pool we sat next to. It flew like a stone being skipped as on a calm lake right over the rope with the styrofoam floaty things that corded off to the deep end. In one move, as if pushed down by an unseen hand, it plunged into the water there, and bubbles coming up around it, as if an unseen force was pushing it into the water. Halfway down, into the deep of the water of her dad's spotless pool, it seemed to be let go, and slowly slipped to the bottom. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we knocked over chairs, running to the side of the pool to look down at it sitting at the bottom of the deeper end of the pool, just past the blue and white rope. I broke the silence with a, "I ain't going in there to get that. Somebody does not want us touching that thing." "Yeah," she said back, holding her wet towel tight in front of her and shivering a little. We looked toward her dad, towel drying his newly washed DeSoto in the driveway, not very far away from us. What do you say after something like that? Somehow, I guess we felt better for just seeing him there. I think we both thought of calling out to him, but neither one did. Not much was said after that. I sat in the chair and thought I was just given a warning not to mess with this thing. Was it a warning from my mom? Someone who knew my friend and was protecting her? A guardian angel? Something just messing with two dumb kids and having a laugh? It sure wasn't the wind. We just won't ever know, but I can tell you two things for sure. One, I never touched another Ouija board. Looking back now at the frame of mind I was in, that's probably a good thing. Two, that planchette sat right there at the bottom of that pool till her dad fished it out a week later with his net. Friends don't let friends Ouija.
And that's from We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life by Sysco Murdoch, and a little help from yours truly, Steve Stockton.
That's a true story, man. That happened. That planchette I'm telling you, as God is my witness, that thing zigged to one side and then back. And with a little force, I mean, it took everything to hold. I mean, I can speak from my side. Hold my fingers down because I'm holding on to it because it's moving so fast. And it just went all the way to the right and then slid right after our fingers, cut across that board, caught air. The table was right next to the shallow end. It was a little bit of concrete, and then you had the stairs to go down the shallow end, the pool, so, the long diving pool. And it caught enough air to fly off that board, cover the concrete, go clear across the shallow end, and just off on the other side of that, where that blue and white rope was, where the deep end started, and then plunged down. You could see the bubbles. I mean, it was like a force pushed it, and then just let go, and it just kind of just glided to the bottom. And we just stand there with our mouths hanging open, watching it, like boom. And when it stopped, that's when we got up and scrambled and looked down at it. I couldn't believe it. So I never touched another one. No.
Yeah. I've had some experiences with them. I've got a video on my channel called Ouija and Me. It talks about good experiences with them, and then it's been years since I messed with one. But I do have a recording here, and I played this last night for some people that were in the chat. This is one of the most scared times I've ever been, and it involves a Ouija board. That'd be like a Game Boy that's a Ouija. It has a Ouija board story in it toward the end. I'm going to go ahead and cue that up here. It's called The Thing in the Ditch. Let me go ahead and put it up here. Yeah, this is about 9 minutes long, so enjoy it, and I'll give you some more background on it. I don't remember what I was doing at the time, but I remember the location extremely well. I was playing in the edge of the woods near an ancient ditch line on my parents' property. There was an old wire structure nearby. I think it had been a dog run at one time, where my brother kept hunting dogs before I was born. I was just poking around, looking at nothing in particular. It was summertime, school was out, and I was kind of bored. When you were a kid living out in the rural wilds of East Tennessee, you had to make your own fun. I wouldn't be bored for very much longer, however. I'd just left the crumbling, rusted ruins of the wired dog enclosure and walked near to the edge of the ditch. The ditch itself was probably 8 to 10 feet deep and a good 30 feet across. Suddenly, though, the forest seemed off. Everything seemed too quiet, like being in a vacuum. I stood still, trying to figure out what was going on. I glanced up toward the crest of the small hill just before it dropped into the ditch, and then all hell broke loose. Looking back, the only way I can describe it is that it looked like some large animal had come up out of the ditch and was running toward me, kicking up leaves in its wake. The truly frightening part being that whatever was kicking the leaves a foot into the air was completely invisible. I did what any kid of 7 years old would have done. The instant the paralysis of fear broke, I ran down the hill toward home, screaming like a maniac. I was making so much noise that my mother heard me coming down the hill and was actually waiting for me on the back porch when I arrived. I was out of breath, a shaking, sobbing mess. It was several minutes before I could gather myself and calm down enough to answer all the questions my now distraught mother was firing at me. I tried my best to explain what I'd witnessed and what I hadn't seen. That was the part that scared me the most. She held me close and took me inside the house to further help me calm down and stay that way. For as soon as I would start recounting the tale, I would once again begin to panic. That's how truly frightened I was. She promised we'd sort it all out as soon as my father got home, and even call my brother and ask him to stop by after work. When my father came home, my brother arrived about the same time. I was still somewhat shaken, and my mother did her best to explain what had happened. Finally, I accompanied my father and brother outside and almost to the area where the attack had occurred. There was no way I was willing to go all the way back into the top side of the ditch, where the thing had begun chasing me, even with my father and brother present. Although they could clearly see where the leaves had been disturbed, just as I described, like an adult or something large, running and kicking up leaves as far and as high as possible, there wasn't a sign of anything else. After conjecturing about the possibility of several different animals, both wild and domestic, I dutifully eliminated each one, because those were all things you could see. My father and brother both concluded that they had no idea what I'd witnessed or what had been chasing me. They believed me, though, due to the fact that I wouldn't have been able to fake being scared that genuinely, and also because they had both had their own inexplicable encounters in the woods on other occasions. I shied away from that part of the ditch going forward, but, oddly enough, had no problems playing in or near it several hundred yards farther down. On the rare occasions when I did visit the part close to where I'd had my encounter, I made sure I wasn't alone. A couple of times, I even enlisted the help of my best friend John. Sort of using each other for bait, one would stand near where I had the encounter while the other hid a short distance down the hill behind a tree. It didn't work. Whatever had chased me was smarter than we'd given it credit, a fact that really didn't surprise me in the least. I sort of forgot about the encounter, although ignored is probably a more descriptive word, and just stayed away from the upper portion of the ditch line when alone. Other than the occasional, "What do you think it was that scared you that day by the ditch?" from my father, I didn't think much about it after the initial nightmares faded. Flash forward 8 years. I'm 15 years old at this point, a much more accomplished woodsman, and it takes a lot to scare me now. We'd sold the property there where I grew up and were preparing to move to a new split-level house we'd had custom built a few miles away. I spent the last few days wistfully exploring my childhood haunts one last time, knowing I would, perhaps, never again be able to visit under the same circumstance. I was sort of chuckling to myself as I walked up to the area of the ditch, remembering the sheer terror I'd experienced as a child. At that time, the 8 years that had passed seemed like half a lifetime, and in a way, I guess they were. I mounted the top edge of the ditch and peered down inside, wondering what on earth I'd witnessed all those years ago, when I heard a familiar noise, the sound of running in the leaves. I looked down into the ditch and saw the exact same circumstance I'd witnessed years before. The leaves were being kicked to and fro by something headed straight for me. I moved away from the ditch and started down the hill, not quite running yet, when whatever it was came out of the ditch and continued speeding toward me in the leaves. I broke into a run. At least I didn't scream and cry this time. This was my last visit to the ditch. We moved into our new house about a month later. Flash forward a few more years. I was at a party with a friend after work. It was one of those parties where I only knew the person I was with and didn't know any of the other people in attendance. A few of the girls in attendance at the party had found a Ouija board behind the host's sofa and had received her somewhat reluctant permission to play with it. If memory serves correct, there were 4 girls working the board, while the rest of the room was encouraged to ask questions. When it came around my turn to ask the mystifying oracle a question, I had a doozy. "What scared me as a child?" I asked, offering no additional information whatsoever in regards to the incident to which I was referring. Amazingly, slowly, the planchette began to move across the board, and it spelled out 2 words: WATERSPRITE. When the group looked to me for an explanation, I merely smiled and shrugged. They jokingly said maybe it was thirsty and wanted a drink. The next day, I went to the library. This was at least a decade prior to the advent of the internet, and with the assistance of the reference librarian, looked up everything I could find regarding water sprites or water spirits. It turns out they are a mythological entity, an elemental earth spirit, if you will. These water guardians, also known as naiads, are said to be found around streams. Interestingly enough, my incident happened not more than 100 yards from an area where no less than 7 natural springs flow out of a hillside and combine into one, then flow into the nearby lake. Had I chanced upon some strange place that was sacred to the fae or fairy folk? If so, how come no one else was chased away by the sprite? Was it because of my sensitivity to all things paranormal? The original incident had happened only about a year or so after my experience with a full-bodied apparition of a toddler not too far away. The mind boggles. Another theory I've entertained is due to the ditch having been the road through the area some decades prior. Was the ghost of a murdered Revolutionary War or Civil War soldier doomed to protect an area near the stream over and over for the rest of eternity? A few years prior, my father and brother had found a broken Civil War-era bayonet near the creeks while clearing brush, and East Tennessee is known to be dotted with sites of smaller skirmishes in addition to some of the larger battles. And yet a third theory surfaced while talking to a family friend who was a bona fide treasure hunter. He claimed that he had heard tales of a treasure buried in the area going back before the Civil War. He also related tales of strange happenings when he did find hidden treasure. Sort of like the way pirates were said to kill a crewmate at the sight of a buried treasure in order for his spirit to forever protect the buried loot. In the end, I have no explanation, particularly not a rational one. I only know that this pair of encounters are among the most frightening I have ever had. As always, I engage my listeners to provide me with possible explanations or theories, or if you've had a similar encounter, I'd love to hear from you. My contact information is in the description. And we're back. Those of you just joining us, I'm Steve Stockton. My guest tonight, author, storyteller Sysco Murdoch, is with us. We've been sharing some spooky stories here. That was one of mine. I played it in the stream last night just when we were hanging out here enjoying the rain, and had a little Ouija story there toward the end. But yeah, that's what came out of the Ouija board at that party. And I didn't know anybody there. I didn't even really know the person I was with at the party. And certainly didn't know the girls working the board, and that's what that was. So going to the Ouija board, it was some kind of fae folk or an elemental or whatever you want to call it there. Hey there, use our name. Good to see you back in here tonight. Want to welcome a couple new mods we've got here with us tonight. Vez is moderator now, and TC is moderator. So everybody stay in line, or they're here to crack some skulls. But I appreciate you guys modding for me. So Sysco, what's next? You got something else for us there?
Golly, I wanted two things. One, I want to hear more about the possessed Furby. After somebody played with the Ouija board on here, I was reading the chat. That's hysterical.
Yeah,
I mean,
I saw that.
I know it sounds funny, but it's not funny if it's happening to you. I mean, I had a teddy bear move on me one time. Didn't you know somebody who had rented a room from a landlady who was pulling all kind of black magic she didn't know about, and her teddy bear got up and gave her the finger or something?
Yeah, it was a lady that used to attend my brother's church, and she had lived with this woman that was doing all these kind of black magic things toward her, and she didn't know it. And yeah, she was, I think she was combing her hair or something. She was doing something in front of a mirror, and she looked in the door behind her, and a teddy bear that she kept on her bed was standing in the doorway, and it didn't have fingers, or probably would have given her the finger, but it was standing there kind of dancing and pumping its fists up and down, and just scared the daylights out of her. And then she started seeing like shadow people and things in her house, that hooded things that had no face. It was some really, really dark stuff. And certain times she would have something come over her to where she couldn't even get out of bed. She'd think she was dying, and then like just a few hours later it would pass and she'd be up and around again. But it was certainly some kind of evil or demonic activity or something there. I've heard some other Furby stories. My daughter had one when she was little, and it didn't do much, but it made a little noise. It had been sitting in the closet, and I heard it, and I went and checked on it, and there weren't even any batteries in it, so I don't know how that happened, but it did. And another time she had a toy cell phone that didn't have any batteries in it, and this was during an electrical storm, so that could be the reason. But it started ringing, without any batteries in it. And then another Furby story I heard, a guy had one that sat in a closet for years, like 6 or 7 years, and then all of a sudden he heard it sitting in the closet talking to itself one day. That one did have batteries in it, but he's like, there's no way those batteries could last, 6 or 7 years. But yeah, Coffin Cat's the one there that had the Furby that kept saying devil dance, and fluttering its eyes. Yeah, that would, I think I would have took that one out to the barbecue pit.
Well, see, wait now, Steve. Look at you telling people to burn things. Now, have we talked about this before? No. Don't burn it. You'll just release the energy and multiply it. Just trust me on that, guys. Please, just bury it, cover it in salt, and bury it.
Paranormal show on TV where I watched some guys, they'd caught a spirit in a mason jar, and I think it was a different kind of spirit in the mason jar, and they'd been drinking it. But yeah, they took it out in the woods and blew it up.
Yeah,
I can't remember what show that
and
was.
I like them. I know Scott Porter. Scott Porter is a nice man, extremely smart in the paranormal, very nice gentleman. I mean, he is just as sweet and genuine as every single one of those guys are. But I've met 3 of them, and they were Tennessee Wraith Chasers, and then it went something else, and then it went something else. But they are the sweetest, most genuine guys. You know what I mean? But when you've got producers that say, "Hey guys, here, how's this for an idea for a show? We want you to catch a spirit in a mason jar and blow it up." All right, But yeah, that they are.
Yeah, there's some spirits in jars in Tennessee. My family can attest to that. I come from moonshiners and whatnot, bootleggers. But yeah, it was interesting. But I don't think that would do anything to a spirit. But you were talking earlier about your phone, and the time I talked about the black-eyed kids. I kid you not. When I sat down here to start this show, I checked my phone. It was at 72%, and 10 minutes went by or something. We talked about the black-eyed kids. My phone was down below 15%. It popped up that I needed to put it on the charger, and usually I can charge it and it lasts all day, and go from 72% to 15% in just a matter of minutes. I think they got my phone this time, Sysco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens every time. I mean, and if you're looking for it, something else will happen. I mean, it's just so weird. I mean, I'll tell you right now, folks, if you hear about loud crash because somebody knocked on this window behind me, it's because I ran to get my shotgun. Because that's just the thing. I've got water. The ocean comes right out in the bay, and I've got the big
Mario or Tone is listening, I'll give you $10. One of you fellas to sneak outside and bang on the window.
You better give them more than $10. They're going to need that for the medical bills, man.
Mario's her husband, the keyboard player, and Tone's her son.
They're not going to. No way. They wouldn't mess with that. We're not getting in her way.
But
they've had it with tea with this dang lockdown. Being an herbalist, I've got them so full of tea and vitamins, and herbs and poultices, mashes, and yeah.
TC was telling me I need to sage my home. TC, I do that regularly. I sage my house, and I also put sea salt in the corners. Yep. And run everything out of here once in a while. It's one of those things that when you deal with the paranormal, sometimes the paranormal deals with you too. I've had things, just because of stuff that I've studied and stuff that I've watched and stuff that I've written. I don't know if I'm attracted to it or it's attracted to me. As I have a long history of this. I saw my first full-bodied apparition. I was not quite 6 years old, and I'd had some weird experiences before, but that was my first real ghost sighting, and that it didn't scare me at all. It just made me curious. I talked about it in that video there. But that's a car coming down the street. Looked like a little kid ran out from behind the car that was stopped to the stop sign, ran across the road at an angle down into our yard. And if you've ever seen little kids that have barely mastered walking, they'll start running too fast and then just lose control and fall. And that's what happened. But when the kid fell, he just was gone, just disappeared. And I was less than 100 feet away, I'd say. Our driveway was 212 feet long. I know that because I measured it later on for another reason. And I went straight to that spot. There was no little kid there, nothing that looked like a little kid, no hole that the little kid fell in. and it just didn't scare me. It made me curious. And my grandmother was a self-professed gypsy witch, and she knew all kinds of little arcane rules and superstitious stuff. And I asked her about that, and she said, well, sometimes you'll see things that are maybe meant for you to see or maybe meant for somebody else to see. And she said that's just the supernatural way of reminding you that you're different and that sometimes you see things that other people won't.
Right.
So
absolutely true. And I'll tell you something else that I've learned over time. And like I said, I mean, I've been in this for a long time. And I mean, I've been searching and researching and gathering data and, just data, whatever you want to call it. My son gets mad at me because he's such a science head. And you go, it's data. I'm like, whatever. Information. We used to say information. But anyhow, gathered for a long time. And I can just tell you, I mean, the things that I know you can fit on a pinhead, it's mostly theory and thought and process and gathering. And then you find something else that just shifts your whole thing, or you think you understand something. And then the supernatural, the paranormal comes back and go, oh, right, take a look at this, because I mean, the bullseye keeps moving, And I mean, I say things and it sounds like firm on some stuff. That's because it took me a long time to get comfortable in thinking, okay, I understand this part, and I'm pretty good there. But I've, had to waver over the years too when it comes to you think you understand. Now I, absolutely think that there's other dimensions. I think there's interdimensionals. I think, and I don't argue with people because you have every right to believe what you want to believe at this time or think or set on a theory. But I swear Bigfoot's interdimensional. I know that there's portals. I mean, and I say no because I've just seen too much evidence with my own eyes and people I trust and people I've never met before and read, and their stuff snapped right into place. And I'm like, yeah, man, there's got to be. I mean, like all the times you've gone into the woods and all the sound goes out, and I know that if I take 2 more steps, something's going to happen. I back up, back right on out of there. That's the Native American in me. That's what I was told.
And the Native American story, Bigfoot, that goes way, way back. And it's one of those things like UFOs, it knows no real cultural or religious boundaries. There's just about any culture in the world has got, the grass man or the hairy man or the big gray man or Yeti or the abominable snowman or whatever. And same with UFOs and things like that. So it's something like, and, there's been stuff dating back to ancient times where they've found cave drawings and stuff that looked like a Bigfoot or a UFO or something. So I think they're some sort of interdimensional travelers, or they have some sort of ability to,
I think they do,
vibrate at a higher or lower frequency to where we can't see them, or I don't know. It's interesting.
Either or cloaking, something along those lines. I mean, and then I got in a really interesting conversation with somebody once that were saying that maybe an interdimensional came through and bred with another similar, and there's multiple kinds. We go on all night about that, but that's why I wasn't afraid when I saw the one I saw. And I still can't tell you it was Bigfoot because I never saw his feet. You remember me telling you this?
It was Babyfoot, right? Tell us that story.
Little Babyfoot. I mean, I felt so bad for him. Man, if I didn't have my kids with me, I might have been able to help them. But as a mom, you want to protect your kids first. That's your number one thing. If you're a parent, you want to get your kid out there.
You don't want to give baby Bigfoot a ride and have it chew your kid's face off or something.
Well, the thing is I've always had this thing. I was a driver in the Army, so when I went through all the training that they give you when you're in transportation, I mean, big trucks, Jeeps, you name it, and I had to go through a lot of defensive driving courses as well because I was a VIP driver. So, like you see now where you see people like in the Secret Service driving the president around or something, they're all trained. I mean, they can get that car out of there in all kinds of different ways, So I had to go through stuff like that. But I got so used to you're almost trying to keep a 360 view of everything that's around you. And it's automatic. So You mix that kind of stuff with being, like a 5-level empath. And what I mean by that, I don't know if anybody in the chat knows, there's multi-level empaths. And you might be an earth empath, you might be an animal, you might be, just really high in tune with other people, or you can be an animal in earth and not be in tune with people at all. I mean, it's all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And Steve is too, by the way, very high tuned. But so when I'm driving, I'm almost picking up everything that's around me. And that's very hard. Like we were talking about lands that massacres have been on, or any kind of war or trauma the land remembers. And driving through stuff like that is incredible. Luckily, if you're driving through, you can usually get through a place real fast, but some of it's pretty big. And we had this one road. In fact, my son, oh gosh, we're driving in the road, and I thought it was just me. And I never said anything to the kids to get them scared. There was one stretch of highway, and I think it lasted, I want to say about 3 or 4 miles, which doesn't sound like much, but, if you're only driving 35 miles an hour, that can be a little bit, to get through. And right before you drive through it, it would be like this heavy weight. If anybody here has ever been to a dentist and had that thing thrown on you that before x-rays, that heavy just chest brace that they put on you, that like flak vest it almost looks like, it's just like thunk, and it just hits on you really heavy and just gets real tight as you get through the real dense part of it, and it's almost like you're driving in slow motion. And right after that road, I lived in rural Alabama, and right after that road, I'd have to take a left, and then it was nothing but cornfields for like 10 miles on both sides. And then all of a sudden it would break into beat. You could see a house or a driveway going to a house, and then cornfield, both sides, and woods. And you'd have to keep your eye out because you'd have a deer run out in front of you, or kids, teenagers smoking dope in the cornfields, happen a lot out there. And, but they just, they're running and chasing each other, and they don't realize it, and all of a sudden there's a break in the corn. And then right there as the road stops, they'll bring it right up to the edge of the road. And then there's road and cars coming, and then there's more cornfield on the other side of the road. So you're paying attention. And this one night I'm driving, it was just getting twilight. And my son was in the passenger, I was driving, he's in the passenger seat, he's about 9 or 10. And then the cornfield, of course, was right. I mean, he could have stuck his hand out and hit a corn stalk. That's how close it was to his window. And I got this overwhelming, like I said, always paying attention, something's going to jump out. And I got this overwhelming sadness. And it hit me off guard because I had just gone through that one part, and usually I didn't get it again off of that one road. And that heaviness came over, and then this overwhelming sadness, like, I can't even explain it to you. I mean, I think if you had poked me in the arm, I'd start bawling. And I don't, you know what I mean? I'm not like that. And it was just depression, and fear, and sad, and just overwhelming. It just kept building and building and building. I'm like, what in the hell is going on? And I look at my son, and I look back, and I'm thinking, the only thing I could think of is that I had just driven through a place there had been a car accident where somebody had died and suffered really bad, before they died, which is sad in its own right. And then all of a sudden, I see this dark figure, and it's on my son's side of the car, and it's just this darkness, like in the corn. There's a break in the corn, like somebody short, somebody the size of maybe, a 12-year-old or something, in the corn. And I'm driving really slow because I think it's a deer, or God knows what, bear, could be anything, or a person fixing to just run in front of my car, and I don't want to hit anything. And I'm driving slow, and as I drive, I see my son's head turn and look, and he sees the same thing I do. He didn't say anything. And I drive by, and I see this kind of brown and gray, like I said, about the size of a young teenager. I saw his face. I saw his arms hanging down to his side. And because of the way the window came by, I only saw him from about the belly up. And right where his belly was, the hair was kind of, thinning out, so you could see his skin was like that, like an elephant would be. Real wrinkly, and it looked like leather tanned, And he had his head down, he just kind of looked up, and he caught our eyes as we go by, and he had this big bottom lip, and it was just pouted out, like you stick your bottom lip out in a big old pouty. And and I'm like, what? And, and he caught our eyes. And the first thing I did was grab my son's arm and pull him towards me, because I didn't know if this thing was going to reach out and grab him. Like I said, he could have reached out and grabbed corn, so this thing could have reached out and grabbed him. And I just hit the gas, man, and took off. And as soon as I got, quarter of the football field away from it, the feeling lifted. And that was when the silence broke. And my son looked at me and goes, "Did you see that?" And it's like, "Yeah, man, I did." And he said, "Did you see his lip?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I did." I saw baby Bigfoot. And I went home, and he was just sitting on the chair. And he goes, "He was so sad, Mom." And I'm like, "You felt it too?" He said, "Yeah, it was bad. I think he was lost or something. We should go back and help." I'm like, "I'm not taking you back out there." I called some people that lived on that farm. I said, "You ever see anything?" "No, never see anything. See some weird stuff out here." And I didn't say what I saw because I had to live there, just calling around to see if anybody'd seen anything there. Now, since then, I've talked to people, and they said that they didn't think it was a Bigfoot. That there's another, I wish I could remember the name, but I can't, similar to Bigfoot, but has a huge protruding bottom lip. And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me, right?" I said, "No. They're prevalent in Tennessee and here. And I'm like, "Well, just when you think you know something, you don't know nothing." That's my Bigfoot story.
Wow. I've never had a sighting. I've had some experiences in the woods where I've heard the howls and the yips, and the yowls have been pelted by rocks. That was in the Jefferson National Forest up in, I think it was in Virginia. It's right there on the Tennessee-Virginia border, near Damascus, Virginia. It's on the Appalachian Trail up there. And it was weird. But I've been hearing the knocks and stuff, but it was like all around me. There were several of whatever it was. And then and I didn't even know I was being hit with the rocks because I didn't feel them. And I know that's weird. It was like these little round river rocks, maybe about the size of a silver dollar, the little smooth, flat rocks. And the only reason I noticed was I heard them hitting the ground. And instead of like coming in at an angle like somebody was tossing them or lobbing them at me, they were coming straight out of the woods and would hit me and fall down. I picked one up, and it was almost hot to the touch. And I'm like, I need to get out of here. I don't know what's going on here, but something doesn't want me here. So I left. And in that case, I just took off back down the trail where I was headed to. But
Wow.
And then I've been up close to Mount St. Helens across the river here in Washington, and the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. There's been a lot of Bigfoot sightings up there, and I did see some odd tracks in the snow. It was in April or May, about a year or so ago, and there was still snow if you got up high enough, and I was up above the snow line, and that was my thought, that'd be a good time to look for tracks. And me and the friend that I was with, she saw it first, and she's like, "Look at that, look, what is that?" And I'm thinking, that looks like a huge bare footprint in the snow. But again, where there's snow melt and things going on, it can distort and make things look strange. Now, I haven't been back up there in the snow again, but I plan to go back up there and look some more around that area. But I would love to have a sighting. I'd love to see Bigfoot.
I mean, everybody says, well, if I saw him, I do this, I take pictures, I do. It depends on your situation. I mean, if you're out there and you're looking and you're ready, you could probably get something like that, a picture or whatever. But in my situation, I was just, I had to get my kid out of here. That's your first thing. That's your first instinct as a mom or a parent, But I felt bad for the little thing. I still do. And I mean, it's been at least 15
Yeah,
years.
just so sad. It's like it was lost or something. It
Yeah, yeah.
stepped through the
Yeah.
wrong portal or something. Like, where's my mom at? How do I get back home?
I showed you a picture. If I can, I'll see if I can pull that up and show you a picture of exactly what it looked like. It blew my mind because somebody drew one and they called it Baby Bigfoot. And now I don't know. It's holding his tail in the picture, but it made me enough. I mean, I was scanning for something. I can't remember what it was, and it just popped up. I think it was a cryptid show that we were doing. And I was trying to pull up some art to put in the stuff. And I came across it. And it blew my mind because whoever drew this picture must have seen one too. It looked exactly like the one I saw. And I'll see if I can pull it up real quick. I'll send it to you, and you can throw it in the chat if you like.
Yeah, if you can.
I don't think I can put links here. I'll just send it to you in the messenger because these people, when they see it, they're going to be like, "Oh, look at him! He's so cute." But not standing next to your car in the dark.
Yeah. I thought I'd made you a mod too. Say something in the chat, and then I'll make you a mod so you can put a link directly in there.
All right, let's see.
You know, I thank
see if I can. Hold on.
and TC for modding for me tonight. We had a good crowd here. I've never really had any trouble here. Every now and then we get a troll that somebody just wanting to come in and have fun, but you put something. Okay, well, that's what I asked for. So that's.
I can barely see. I'm telling you, I'm sitting here in the dark. Okay, let's see here.
You're modded now, so you can put any links in there that you want to share.
All right, I will. But yeah, I still feel sorry for him. I mean, I saw a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, I lived right on the Alabama-Tennessee border. I could stand on. This sounds rude, but I'm a mom of 3 boys. You know what I'm saying? I could stand on my front porch and I could spit into Tennessee. That's how close I live to the border.
Yeah, and just the fact that it's Tennessee and Alabama, you're going to see weird stuff anyway. I can say that I'm from Tennessee, no hate. There are some weird things and some weird people out in those woods.
Oh, I'm
related to some of them.
He's so cute. He really, and this one's sad too, except he doesn't have his little bottom lip poked out. Hang on one second. Let's see if I can get this. I'm still going to have to send it to you, Steve, because I've got it on my phone and my laptop is over there. I don't know if I can do it. Let me just send it to you real quick.
You can drop it in Messenger, and then I'll either put the picture up on the screen or I'll put a link out to it or both. I don't know that people watching may not be able to hit a link without leaving the show, and we don't want that to happen.
No, we don't want that to happen. But anyway, I think you guys got to see this because it's just the most precious little thing you've ever seen. Like I said, not in the dark, not looking out your window, something like that, you know. Because if I could have helped it, I would have. I'd have probably made it a sandwich, you know me. I got more stuff out here. But, yeah, that was a trip. That was the only time I ever saw Bigfoot. But my grandma, now she was Lenape and Cherokee, and she would tell me stuff just like your grandmother did, just like out of the blue. And one time we were in the woods. I can't remember what it was. I'd be lying if I said I remember what we were talking about. And then all of a sudden she said, just so you know, there's things out here in the woods. Some of them won't hurt you, and some of them just, you know, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. And I'm like, what are we talking about here, you know? I was little. I mean, I was like 7, 8. And she said, you know, this thing they call the Sasquatch, this, you know, and she had another name for it, too. I wish I could remember. It wasn't Bigfoot. It wasn't any of the ones you hear now. It was something, I think it was probably in the Lenape language. And she said, you have to understand, they're more connected to spiritual. They're half here in this world and half in the next. Now, what does that mean? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That was trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was big time trippy. But I think that's one of the reasons why I've always believed they were interdimensional, or at least had the ability to go in and out. And I think a lot of other things do too. I mean, you see these things like the Smiling Man, the Grinning Man, and stuff like that, and then you turn around, they're gone. And
yeah.
You know, Skinwalker Ranch, that's getting real big again.
Yeah.
They just did that
things that appear or can't appear or materialize. I had a lady tell me a story one time in all earnestness. I mean, I have no reason to disbelieve her, but when she was a young girl, there was a tornado was coming through East Tennessee, and her sister were in the bed, and this, I don't know, they either didn't have electricity at this point in time or the electricity was out because of the storm, but she said there wasn't any lights or anything, but just from the lightning outside, she saw what she thought was a spider on a web, like coming down from the ceiling real slow, and she's thinking, well, I'm going to have to get up and get something and whack that spider, it'll end up on us. And she said about the time it got down to close to the floor, it turned into the shape of a man that she could see through, but he was darkish, and walked through the wall and went outside. That had to have been enough for me right there.
Wow.
But, what was something like that? And it came ahead of this storm that blew through East Tennessee and actually destroyed a bunch of property and killed a bunch of people and stuff. So it was almost like, in Something Wicked This Way Comes, it was some kind of harbinger or some kind of something that was coming ahead of that storm. But she wasn't going to say anything to her sister. She said, I was afraid it'd scare her. And then she said about that time her sister's like, did you see that? So they both saw it and both described it the same way.
Man, this picture's fighting me. Why are you fighting me? Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's crazy because, like I said, I've seen stuff and then something, bad happened right after. I mean, really bad. I mean, you lose a loved one.
I think you sent me the wrong link there, Sysco.
I did. I sent you Lincoln.
Lincoln's ghost again. So is that what the Bigfoot looked like? He was tall and kind of hairy. And...
Exactly. That's him right there. Golly.
Wearing a bow tie.
Top hat, man. No, it's a Pinterest picture, and I'm having a hard time getting it up here. Hang on, I'm trying. Problem is, I'm trying to talk and do tech at the same time. We both know I can't do that.
Yeah.
And it won't let me do it. Okay, I'm figuring this out. Tell a story, Steve. I'm gonna figure this out. Hold on. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, we're talking about grandmothers and scary things. Hey, Kingsport in the house. Good to see you there. I can't think of the name of it. I mean, Sean Graham, if you ever listen to his show, Chasing the Truth Paranormal, he grew up around Kingsport. I assume you're talking about Kingsport, Tennessee. There's a tunnel up there, and I can't remember the name of it right now, and I've been there. But it's one of those where it's an old disused railroad tunnel, and you can actually drive up to it, and it's kind of like the train, the Phantom, or the thing where if you drive up to the railroad tracks, the ghost kids will push your car across the tracks. But this is in a tunnel, and if you go up there and park your car in the opening of this tunnel, and I don't remember if it's open on the other end or not, but you can drive your car up into it. And Sensabaugh Tunnel, there you go. I knew, I couldn't think of the name of it, but yeah, you go and you pull your car up into that tunnel, and then when you leave, you'll find these handprints all over your car. And I've been to the tunnel. It's a creepy place. And the night I was out, it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we heard like a female voice singing back in there. It sounded like a little girl singing, and almost sounded like she was singing a hymn or something. I'm like, I think we need to get out of here. It is open on both ends. Okay, I couldn't remember. I knew it was open on the one end because we drove the car in it. But yeah, that's an interesting part of Tennessee. There's a haunted cemetery up there and a lot of things going on. Yeah, I did get that picture. Let me save that out here and I'll pop it in the chat.
Everybody that sees that's going to go, aww. How could you leave that thing standing in the cornfield? That's what blew my mind, though, because I found this, had to be like 18, going on 19 years ago I saw this thing. And then last year, somebody draws a picture. It might have been like out of their mind, I mean, just made it up for what they thought it might look like. But that's what it looked like. So, like, to me, I'm like, somebody saw that,
Just a moment here, and I'll drop it in the chat. Or not in the chat. I'm actually gonna put it on the screen here. I think that'd be
That's cool.
So, I can put a link to it as well, but I'll put it on the screen here so people that can't click on a link can see it. And can't see who the artist is there. But this is the baby foot that Sysco saw.
Wait, you see everybody, we get ready to go, aww.
There he is.
Incredible.
Screens now.
Yeah, that's just a strange experience, though, that, you know, you're trying to describe
it a little bit there. There we go.
You're just trying to describe it to people for years, and then you're flipping through, and all of a sudden you see it. I just stopped dead in my tracks. I'm like, oh my God, that's him. That's him. He's holding some little onions, I think. First I thought he was holding his tail, you know, like he has his tail wrapped around. Isn't that the saddest little thing you ever saw?
Alex Evans is the artist there. I can see it now.
The beautiful, beautiful drawing. He's holding some kind of scallions, like the green onions you pull up.
Mm-hmm.
He has little feet. Like I said, I didn't see his feet. And when I saw him, his head was like that big. That's why I was like saying it didn't have a neck, you know?
Yeah.
Just kind of.
It does look like he's about to trip over that bottom lip there. He's pouting. But yeah, he just looks so sad.
Yeah. The one I saw, like I said, if you can imagine that one pouting, and his lip matched, the skin on his lip matched his belly. The one I saw had very much less hair on the bottom on his belly. Because I could see like an elephant skin. It stuck in my mind, you know. But isn't he cute? That's true. That's a trip. But, yeah, that's what I saw. Standing up. It's crazy. Yeah, things exist, man.
Have you ever contacted this artist to see what his inspiration was for that drawing? If it was a sighting he had or one that somebody told him about, or he may have heard you on a show and drew it.
It's possible, too. That's possible, too. You know, anything is possible. I ought to try to do that, maybe, you know. But like we said, we were saying with, you know, when I was writing the book, when I was writing the chapter on Gettysburg, I mean, some of that I wrote, and I'm writing, you know, from my heart, and it's just pouring out. And, I mean, I'd get like 3-4 paragraphs in, and then I'd come out of this, like, I don't know, zone or something. I'm like, God, did I write that? Look at that, you know. And it was almost like I had soldiers here in the room with me when I was writing, you know.
And then your story, Cabin 22, she's got an awesome fictional story on my channel that's based in truth called the Cabin 22 Saga. And I remember when you were writing that, and you were writing that like as it went along. You wouldn't know from one day to the next. And she was doing like an episode a night, and I was putting it up on my channel. Still waiting on the end of that, and I know she's working on it. But you said that there was times when you'd come and listen to it on my channel, and you wouldn't even remember writing that. It was almost like something or somebody was controlling the
characters,
not your pen, but your fingers on the keyboard. I guess that's amazing.
It was the characters and the way they were talking, and then when I did the audio, I did all the voices for it in the audio, and put sound effects and different things like that. And the characters are just amazing, and that's why I'm having such a hard time to finish it, because I'm fighting, because I want it to end one way. I have a specific ending.
The characters are disagreeing with it. Some of the fiction I've written before, I've had that happen where it's way different place at the end than where I thought it was headed. TC, just to let you know that, yes, I'm currently in Oregon, but I was born and raised in East Tennessee. Sysco's in New Jersey. She's from Alabama, right there on the Tennessee border. So,
actually, I'm from New Jersey, went into the Army, went all over the place, retired, got out in Alabama, stayed there a long time. Because beautiful back here. Now I'm back again, and
TC says she's from Virginia. Are you from the area right now? I used to live way up just for a short time in the extreme northeastern Tennessee, a little place called Mountain City. It's about halfway between Boone, North Carolina, and Abingdon, Virginia. And if you're around the Abingdon area, go check out the Martha Washington Inn. That's one of the most haunted places I've ever been. It's been a lot of things. It was a girls' school at one time. It was used as a morgue during the Civil War, and that seems to have happened a lot of haunted places. And I know you can talk about that, Sysco, that a lot of these places that they use as field hospitals and morgues, and there at the Martha Washington Inn, they had to store the corpses there to wait until the ground thawed enough, because it was in the wintertime. They had to wait to bury them. And they've seen all kinds of things there and caught some of it on their security cameras. There's a woman that they see walking the halls, and she's got muddy boots, but her feet don't touch the floor. And the night that I stayed there, in one of the rooms that was purportedly haunted, I heard a rapid knocking in quick succession on each of the walls, like in a circle. And then I smelled this just weird, like a wet dog times 10 smell. And there's an old gentleman there that's concierge, and he knows all these legends and stuff. And I asked him about that, and he said that's one of the ghosts. He said that's, you didn't have a visual visitation. He said, but that's you smelled a ghost. He said, you think about that, those soldiers that had been out there fighting and stuff, they hadn't had a bath. They're wearing these heavy wool uniforms that have been dirty and have been soaked, and he said they're probably molded and everything else you can imagine, covered in mud. He said that's, imagine what that wet wool would smell like after a few weeks or months. So, well, there you go. But it was just the most unearthly wet dog smell, just enveloped the whole room, then it was gone.
Yep. Well, right here where I am in Jersey, I'm not far from, if anybody's ever heard of Molly Pitcher's Well and the Battle of Monmouth, and or watched, Turn or some of these George Washington things, you hear all about all of the battles that were all through New Jersey, and during the Revolutionary War. So we've got a lot of that too. But I remember one of the first places out here my mom took me when I was asking about, ghosts and stuff, because I saw a lot of things as a kid. I mean, if you read the book has things in it that I talked about that kind of took you to the next place and what I learned from that, and then the next thing and the next thing. But it's not, and it's in chronological order pretty much, because it's also how I learned about it, what it taught me, and what I thought it was, and then I learned something else, and I went, oh man, that makes sense, I mean, it's basically like that. But there's a lot of stuff that's happened to me. It's not in the book, not everything is in there. And so anyhow, she took me, I was asking a lot of questions and stuff, and she took me to the church that's out there in the Battle of Monmouth. That was right in the middle of it. Still's got cannonballs, stuck in the wall and that kind of thing. I'm sure we've all been to those kind of museums where battles were, and saw the cannonballs and the shots in the wood that's still there, that they kind of put a frame around, just to preserve it, whatever. But this one, that has got to be one of the most haunted little churches I've ever seen, because so many of the battles, so many of the little skirmishes, and then the big battle that happened all kind of went around that church, because they did use it to take a lot of the wounded and put them in the pews. And the blood stains are still on the pews. They've done everything they can to them. They've, sanded them down and furbish them and put the polyurethane, whatever it is that you put on it, and they come back. Mm-hmm. The wood floor as well. And they've left the church pretty much like, now it's like a little museum, But I remember seeing that and walking into that as a kid. I was just overwhelmed with emotion and feeling and stuff, because as a kid, you're wide open if you're an empath or you have any abilities, and you don't really know how to shut them off or ground yourself or shut yourself off, so you don't have to experience all that. So you know what I mean? It was rough, and I'll never forget it. And outside, there was a soldier who was sitting on a gravestone, because the cemetery was there during the battle. Of course, it's much bigger now. And he was sitting on a gravestone talking to somebody, and all of a sudden they shot a cannonball. Now, there's many different kind of cannonballs. Some of them explode when they hit, and some of them are just solid metal, small ones that go through like a large bullet. And this cannonball went right through, according to some journals that were for soldiers that were around him and saw it, went right through, and he kept talking for a second. I mean, he didn't even like realize he was hit. It happened so fast. And then, of course, he fell over and died. And he supposedly haunts and walks around the graveyard with a hole through him. And I can't imagine that, you know, that's awful. Wow. But, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that. But that was one of the things that like I said, when I was asking my mom about ghosts, she never told me. I always suspected. I lost my mom, to the people in the chat, people listen, I lost my mom real early. So I didn't get to ask her an awful lot of questions too much. But I always suspected she had a lot of abilities too. You know, I mean, it kind of follows. But I was sitting here wondering, you know, what story to tell next. And I mean, you mentioned train, and I think about all these things, and you know how our minds work when we get to talking like this. And you know, I was thinking about the Furby and the dancing bear, and I wanted to tell everybody it's not a scary thing, but the thing about the Furbies that got me is when my kids, when they came out, and we got, you know, we're able to get the kids one. It was like one of those Cabbage Patch dolls. Everybody had to have one that Christmas. They were hard to get, you know. And I remember my mother-in-law bought one just in case I didn't get two, you know, for my sons for Christmas. And she grabbed one. I think I bought one at the same time, and she wound up keeping hers. And I don't know how many people in the chat have ever heard of DARPA. Anybody ever heard about DARPA? It's basically they work on all the crazy stuff, like the men who stare at goats, and you know, all kinds of MK Ultra stuff, all kinds of stuff like that. That's a whole other subject. But anyway, if it's kind of crazy, DARPA's in it. So she was a secretary there. And since that Christmas, you know, I had gotten two Furbies, she kept the one and she took it to her office. And that's a big no-no, because once you get those Furbies going, they start recording everything they hear. And it started this big thing throughout the base because people were bringing in their Furbies and playing around with them. And they had to shut everything down. They had to search everybody, and they took all the Furbies confiscated them. Because it was
Furby's new state secrets
exactly.
were a risk to national security.
National security, the Furby national security risk. It was funny anyway. But I'm sitting here wondering what story to tell. How much time do we got, Steve? How much longer we got?
As much as you need. As long as we've got an audience, we can keep talking here. I want to welcome some people in here. We had I think Chantal said she was from Quebec. Got a couple people from the UK with us. That's just amazing, because I think it's like 4 o'clock in the morning there. Jen J 71 said she was from the UK, and I'm probably going to butcher this. Pyewacket. So they're in the UK too. But thanks for joining us, folks. So what you got there for us, Sysco?
Well, they're asking for some historical ghost stories. I definitely got those, but I don't know why I want to tell you this one, and I guess it's because we're talking about don't burn stuff and the energy and stuff, and I was saying bury it, put salt over it. I mean, I don't know how many people, you know, are praying people here, but if you know, you've got to believe in whatever it is you're going to use, you know. So if you don't believe in prayer, you might as well just say a nursery rhyme over it. You know, whatever your belief system is, put your good vibes down on that thing and block it, because burning it's not a good thing. You know, they say, well, I'll burn the house down. If it's like, no, you know. So,
I've done that before, trying to dispatch a spider. Almost set the house on fire once.
That's what I learned about energy. But I'm trying to think of a story I hadn't told on, you know, on other shows that we've been on. And I know you and I have talked about this. And people often say, well, what's like the scariest thing that's ever happened to you, Sysco? And I'm like, man, you know, it probably doesn't have anything to do with the supernatural because, you know, those things happen. You know, I mean, I've done some crazy stuff. I've gone, you know, down into deep, dark basements when, you know, big mercenary guys were coming up the stairs, literally, because everybody in there were combat veterans, and they're coming out of the basement. My son goes, they're coming out. Why are we going down? I'm like, just shut up. Come on. But, you know, I've done some crazy stuff like that. It seems like it would be the most scary thing. And I can't say this was actually the scariest thing, but I'd say that it was one of the biggest learning things that I've ever been through. There was this one time, and I'm an herbalist, like I said, And I base my stuff mostly in Native American traditional herbal stuff, and mixed also with Chinese, because Chinese were doing it, you know, a couple thousand years before us too. So anyhow, and I got in, when you're in Native American tribal, and you get taken into the tribe, it's very interesting. You know, it has to do with your character, and it has to do with your abilities and things like that. So I was always kind of, you know, that kind of person. And they don't call it a healer. Healer's something else, but it's just, you know, you're treating sickness with herbs. That's basically all it is. So I also was learning quite a bit on basically just trying to call in energy and cleanse things. Basically, what I want to learn is to be able to go into houses and cleanse them, and, you know, that type of thing, and to get rid of negativity. And it can be harsh. I mean, we see it on TV now, and Steve talks about it. You know, we're doing this, and we're doing that, put salt in the corners, and we're cleansing with sage and sweetgrass and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more to it. It sounds easy, but there's a lot more to it. And so anyway, I was learning all that stuff. So I got pretty, you know, strong up into the community out there. And I met this friend. As soon as I say this, you're going to know exactly the story I'm going to tell, Steve. I had a really good friend who was also an herbal person who did a lot of cures. And she also did energy readings and things like that when a person came in. And what she really dealt with more than anything was curses. That was her strength, was working on curses. And I'm not just talking about, you know, somebody pointed at me and, you know, put some bad luck on me or bad fortune on me or something like that. I'm talking about generational curses. I'm talking about going back 5 generations. And I don't know if you believe in stuff like that, but like I say all the time, disbelief in gravity is not going to keep you from falling down the stairs. Stuff exists, and there it is. So she was working on this one lady, and sometimes it's like therapy. You know, you have to work a while to get all this stuff off, and it's crazy when you get into all that things. Imagine having an attachment, and when I say an attachment, I mean like a negative attachment. More than likely has never lived or ever been human. We're talking about ancient stuff here, you know. And I don't know what her ancestors did, but they must have been in something, because this poor woman, you know, she was going through a lot. So anyway, she was one of the clients that was my friend. And she came up to me once and she said, look, you know, I could use some of the Native American energy out there. She said, I need you to hold off all this stuff. Once I get it out the circle, I need you to keep it from coming back in. I know this is going to sound crazy. Stick with me here. Need you to keep it from coming back in, so I can get the rest of them off of her and get her to a safe place, so we can send them off so they don't reattach. And I'm like, okay, sounds like a good Friday night. Let's do this. So here we go. And it was really brilliant the way she did it, because she got myself, she got another Native American person who did very much like I did, but she had some other, you know, ways that she was working with, she was strong in. And she got, I want to say, I know there was 2 really lovely ladies that were really strong in Wicca. And for those people who think that Wicca is bad, it's not. You've been misinformed. Wicca is not a bad thing at all. It's very, very, very close to Native American traditional stuff. It's very based in nature and energy. And so anyway, she's got them, and somebody else that was working with her. Now, she was 3rd generation bloodline from Madame Laveau. She's a voodoo priestess. Strong voodoo priestess. And if you know anything about Madame Laveau, she was too. And if you ever want to see Madame Laveau's grave, you can go down there to New Orleans, and you can go into the cemetery, and you'll see her grave there with X's all over it, and 3 X's, and leaving her a gift and asking her for her help. People are still going to Madame Laveau asking for help. Anyway, She was third generation away from her. She was strong in it. And she really, really tried to do good. And she was trying to make up for a lot of stuff that had been misdone by her relatives, not Madame Laveau, but, relatives in her family anyway. Taking advantage of the knowledge and the energy and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that was one of the craziest nights I've ever seen. Because, like I said, when you think that you've seen things, and then you see things, and you go, I don't know nothing. I had no idea this stuff happened. So she's doing this circle, and I'm watching her, and I'm like, what do you need us to do? And I concentrate on what I was doing, and we helped this poor woman. And like I said, it was about the third time. And there was definitely some stuff that came out of her, and it was very, very strong, and it was very, but when I stand, I don't stand alone. So there's that. So what she had done was, this might be interesting to the chat, you have to offer cornmeal and honey and things like that. You put them in the circle. And I'm going to tell you something. There's only two people in that circle. And that one lady was in no position to be moving. She was on the ground, and she was writhing like crazy, and she's screaming, and she's crying, and she's begging. And I mean, it was like, pardon my language, holy hell going on in that circle. Okay? When she put that cornmeal and that honey, and she had other stuff, offerings and things inside the circle. And like I said, I didn't want nothing to do with that. Send them out here. I got it from here. And me and the other lady were out there, and everybody, it was like 4 rings are in the circle. And I was on the outside. And when it was all over, that honey was half gone, and so was the cornmeal. I have no idea how that happened. That was one. I'd never seen that before. Okay? And not to mention everything else that went on. And I can't tell you the personal stuff that went on with that woman, but it was awful. It was awful. And so anyway, that, I got to know her, and, I'd known her for a couple months before we did this, and I knew the other ladies, lovely people, just trying to do good, plain and simple. Now, she asked me, she was going on a vacation, and she asked me if I would sit in for her while she was on her vacation and do the herbal stuff and the soap. We make soap and our own, shampoo and things like that. And there's certain herbs you can put on that people can bathe in to help them deal with certain things, and gemstones and stuff like that. It all has to do with all that. So anyway, I said, sure. Why not, because somebody had to be there to help talk to these people. And a lot of it's just listening to them talk and tell them about their stuff. And she had everything written out that she wanted them to have. So it was no big deal. I didn't worry about doing it. But the lady who owned the shop was a person that was something totally different. She's what we call a left-hander. Does anybody in the chat know what I mean when I say a left-hander? I'm going to look. I don't know.
I know what you're talking about, the left-hand path. Jen J in the chat there, she said she's from the UK. She said her sister is a hedge witch, all about Mother Nature and the moon's power of cleansing crystals, etc. Now, I think that we have a similar thing here. They call it a kitchen witch, and that's somebody that doesn't follow any particular path, or they just kind of do their own thing and they use what they have at hand. Now, if I've got that wrong, let me know. But I love talking to you people from the UK. I've got a lot of friends in the UK. But yeah, I think they know what the left-hand path. That's like the black magic, the evil magic.
Well, it's somebody that has such a strong power, and they've gone through so much, and they've done, and if I get it wrong, I don't mean to insult anybody. This is just what I was told and what I've learned, because that's just it. So, and just basically all you have to do is just raise your left hand, and bam, it's done. That's some serious stuff right there. So anyway, I met her, and, I was like, okay, everything's cool. I'm here to do this. And, listen, I take you one at a time. I judge you by your character and your deeds. You know what I mean? I'm not going to judge you by, unless you're doing something really crazy, hurting somebody, then we got to talk. But still, that's just it. It's none of my business. So I didn't know that she was having a fight with this woman. And then she takes me to the other place she worked. It's like me, just innocent, trying to be good, my eagle feather and my beads and my regalia, just chilling, you know what I'm saying? And she worked at another shop. Same thing. The lady who owned it was a left-hander. Okay. So I set everything up, and I'm going to go in there and give people their soap and, give them their hugs and everything else, and everything's going to be cool, right? I go home, and I find out within about 3 hours that I'm in the middle. It's Halloween, and I'm in the middle of a fight between a voodoo priestess and 2 left-handed witches.
Not a good place to be in the middle of.
Yeah, and it's Halloween. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me, right? This is, I'm being punked here, right? So, anyhow, I'm picking up my phone to make phone calls. There's chanting on my phone. I mean, all kinds of weird stuff's happening. I go down to talk to the one lady to go, look, man, I mean, I'll have elders down here like you would believe. You're going to see Native Americans coming over this mountain. Like, you're going to think you're in a bad Gunsmoke episode or something. I said, you don't understand. I'm not involved in this mess. Back this off, or I'll rain Native American hell on your head. So anyway, it was that kind of thing. And that's how I got involved in that. But the thing was that I learned was one of them got mad at the other one and put a spell of invisibility on her shop. You remember me telling you this, Steve?
Yeah.
I was like, what in the world?
And then, remember, there was a lady that we interviewed, and something happened to the audio, and we never got to run the episode for Journey Through the Gate that had a similar circumstance where I think she had a tarot card reading business, and another witch had put a spell on it where nobody could find it.
True. That's 100% true. And I saw it happen. I couldn't believe it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, and I was half in, like, just amazement of the amount of, the building was there, dude. I mean, it was there. I knew where it was. The sign was there, but it was one of those strip malls that had like 5 little stores. And then, I remember the store next to her was the dog grooming place, and then she was on the end, except when you're looking at it, there was no store on the end. There was no sign out front anymore. You'd get on your phone and call it, and the phone was disconnected. And I'm like, man, I said, I don't know what's happening here. I said, but this is it. I said, I'm calling the elders. I said, I'm not involved in this anymore. I said, whatever you guys, ladies, God bless you. Y'all work it out. I'm not involved, so I didn't take the job. She had to find somebody else. So while she's gone, this was back when you just had flip phones. I mean, other phones were out, but mine was still a flip phone. I had that thing for like 15 years. So I didn't have all the kind of phones that we have now. But you could record and have voicemail, right? I start getting these voicemails, and this is exactly what they sounded like. This still to this day gives me goosebumps. And I've dealt with stuff since, but when you don't know who it's coming from and who it is, it'll chill you to the bone. These are the kind of messages I'm getting on my voicemail, with no number, by the way, just the voicemail. No ring, no phone numbers calling, nothing. And on the voicemail is coming, it's cold. Tell her to get it. Get me out of here. It's so cold. It's so cold. And it would just go off like that.
That gave me chills, Sysco.
I'm like, I took this flip phone, I flipped that sucker closed and chucked it across the room. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. What is going on now? Because we just got through the whole fight with buildings disappearing and phones cutting off and, all these people. I'm like, and I knew it wasn't that because I had it cleansed. The stuff that we had put down, it's like, it's not going to happen, But while I was involved with that, this is what happened because I had the ability. My thing is crossing people that are stuck. That's my thing. For the chat who doesn't know, that's what I try to do anyway. So I think this spirit latched on to that, connected to the energy. I see some people laughing when you say, connected to the energy and don't talk about stuff in the woods, but let me tell you guys something. I've seen some stuff, and it's always funny, like that thing from Jurassic Park. First comes the oohing and the eyeing, and then comes the running and the screaming. This stuff is real. So I get to her. I happen to be there, and I get one of them. Now, I've been getting, I probably got about 20 of those. And I was at, when she came back from her trip, I happened to get one, and I'm going, man, have you ever gotten something like this? And she goes, what do you mean? And I start telling her, and she goes, wait a minute, what is a male or female? I said, it's a man, and he's upset, and I don't know where he is, but it's cold, and tell her to get, to stop it and get me out of here. What are you talking about, She says, let me hear it. I let her hear it. She goes, you're not going to believe this. I said, yeah, I will. I go, why? It's your husband. So you got to be kidding me. Where's your husband? Well, he's passed. Okay. So I'm like, okay. She goes, listen. She says, you tell. I said, no, you tell him that you're not going to get it. You got to tell me the story. This is the story, folks. All this for this. Just to tell you, sometimes you get caught up in this. You get caught up. She tells me the story. This man, and I love bikers dearly. I was married to one of them, and they're some of the nicest people you ever met. So I don't mean anything.
Absolutely. I met the nicest people on a Harley wearing a denim jacket with a name across the back of it.
100%. But I'll tell you, you got to be tough to hang around, and that's something in powwows. That's why I hung around with so many, mercenaries and nomads and stuff like that, because we get them to guard our chiefs that, are traditional, because, well, it's a long story. But anyway, because traditions, they want to kill traditions. They don't want to remember traditions, and other people want to vote and get land and, things like casinos and stuff like that. We just don't want to be extinct. That's traditional, and we want to keep traditions alive. Makes sense if you think about it. So anyway, she tells me the story, and she says, I'm not going around another lifetime with this guy. Okay, what do you mean by that? She says, well, we've been stuck going around. I don't know if you guys believe in reincarnation, but there it is, She says she's been going around lifetimes with this guy, and she wants to end it this one. She's not going to go and then come back and have to deal with him again, because they've been going at it for generations. I'm like, my gosh, it's interesting. Tell me more. So she says that this lifetime, apparently he was really rough on her, very abusive. And one day he had drank too much and chased her around the house with a hatchet and caught her and cut off half of her foot. And she takes off her boot and shows, cut off half her foot. And she got mad, and he went to jail. And let's just say she made sure that he didn't come out of jail. Let's just put it that way. And he passed in jail. And when he passed, she made sure he got stuck. Okay? Then they call it the unseelie fae. We call it, I don't know what you guys call it, in between, purgatory. I've heard many words for it. It's all the same. Deep, dark darkness, and guess what? Very cold. Very cold. So apparently, this man was calling me and leaving voicemails from purgatory. How's that for a story? I told her, look, you got to deal with it, man. You got to tell him, quit calling me. I'm done with this mess. I said, I'm going to go get my people, and I've got to deal with this now. I mean, how did this wind up in my, I said, he knows I'm going to listen, because he knows that this is my thing, and I can't do it because you don't want me to do it. So she's bound in it that way. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear it happened. So she says, okay, she goes, I'll do it. She goes, I need you to come and help me. No, I won't be a part of anything like that. That's between you and him. Get your marriage counselor, get your marriage gypsy. I don't care what you do. Do whatever you need to do. I'm out of it. Tell him I've done my part. I've talked you into doing something. Get him out of there. Do whatever you're going to do. She goes, I won't take him out, because if I take him out, then we're going to go back to it. I said, I don't care. Do what you got to do. All right? I'm going to put love on this, and I'm walking away. And I did. So she calls me over her house a couple weeks later to help this other lady that started telling the story about, because it was her last time to go through, and she was, oh my God, she looked so good. This lady that we were working on at the beginning of the story, she looked fantastic. Color was back in her face. Her hair was all done. She had little rosy cheeks and her makeup on. She was walking different. Her posture was just beautiful. She'd been all like kind of hunched over and nasty, and I was so glad to see her. And she was pregnant, by the way, too, which scares you. But they were having like a little shower for us, so I went over there. And my friend calls me over to the side of the lake, and I'm sitting there, and I'm drinking a beer, toasting, the lady and everything. And I said, what's up? And she said, well, she goes, I finished it and it's done. And I said, okay, what do you mean? And she said, I got him out for you. And I said, oh, that's good, man. That's all right. I'm glad y'all came to a thing. I said, you sent him, we crossed him over into the light. She says, oh, no. She says, I pulled him out and I gave him a choice. I said, what do you mean? And she said, I just wanted you to see it. She said, I gave him a choice. He could either he would be cast out, which means, I don't know what that meant by her, what she was saying, that he would be out of there, but he would be in a worse place. Or he could spend the rest of his time in here. And there's a bottle sitting on the... It sounds crazy to say it out loud, I swear. There's a bottle, which is his favorite beer, an empty beer bottle sitting by the lake, and there's a cork. And all of a sudden, she opens this little box that she's got, and this smoke comes out. She says some stuff, and the smoke comes out and goes into the bottle. Without touching it, the cork comes up off the ground, pop, right on top of the bottle, and she takes her foot. She just, bam! She takes it, puts it in the box, wraps it with this chain with a lock she's got on it, throws it into the water. And I said, did you just put your ex-husband in a bottle? That is one of the craziest things that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I've seen a few, not quite that strange, especially with the phone call stuff. How'd you get your number? That's what I want to know. But I dated a girl one time who was some sort of witch, and went back to her house, and she had a little iron pot, like a bean pot or something there, and it was wrapped in chains and had a padlock through it. And I'm like, what's that all about? She said, oh, that's my ex-husband. I've got him in the pot. And she says, like, I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to put him in the river or not. She was serious. And I was like,
they're serious.
Okay.
The smoke, it was weird color, too. It had like I want to say it looked just like smoke. I don't know. It's hard to say, but if anybody's ever smoked in an outhouse or smoked in a latrine, because back in the Army, if we ever went into the latrines, because there'd be so much gas, the cigarette would glow like green instead of red. It was real weird.
So the methane.
But the methane. Yeah, exactly. The smoke would have a weird kind of, almost like a glow-in-the-dark kind of feel to it. Not the whole thing, just pieces of the smoke. So the smoke would be around and it'd be like this green lit going through it. It's crazy. That's what it looked like. She opened that thing, and she didn't touch anything with her hand. She did everything with her foot, And I wondered if she had to do it with her foot because he cut half of it off and there was more power. I don't know. That's just guesses. But she did everything with her foot. She opened that thing. And all of a sudden, that smoke went from inside of that thing, just like a little stream, like I Dream of Jeannie, like you'd see that smoke come out. Oh. It was crazy. Went in the bottle, the cork lifted off the ground, went whoop, into the bottle. She pushed it back down, put it in that thing, wrapped it with that chain, put the lock on it, said some stuff over it, tossed it. I watched it just float until it went down. Much like that planchette from the, from the Ouija board, just went right down into the ocean. And I'm like, what did I just witness? And she said, well, you had to know. I said, why would you want me to see something like that? She said, because you had to know that I did what you told me to do for the energy board. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't get any more calls after that. I feel bad, man. I think he should have been crossed, but I guess that's none of my business.
Yeah, so he's like in limbo or purgatory or whatever the in-between is or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. And I've known people that have actually gone in there to help cross people. It's amazing. I've got friends right now. I mean, one of them's in the book, one of the stories in the book that we did. I mean, it's called A Tale of Two Bikers. Steve's, actually done stuff like this too. But
yeah, I kept having a dream about this rotting corpse from a guy that had died in a motorcycle crash. And I went to Sysco with it because she's good at dream interpretations things. And we ended up finding out what the guy's deal was. I was just the conduit to get it to Sysco, and she got it to somebody else. But that was a very strange experience. And that's in the book. We talk about that. It's one of the last chapters in the book.
I'll tell you right now, I mean, I know it sounds funny. I'm looking at the chat, and it's like, what's this lady's story about? A voodoo priestess friend of mine.
Got into a fight with a left-handed witch.
Two left-handed witches. God bless them.
And it got ugly.
And it got ugly, and she wound up putting her ex-husband in a bottle. There you go.
After he'd been calling, leaving voice messages from beyond on Sysco's phone.
On my phone. From the unsealed
we
bag.
laugh, but there's some seriously dark stuff that goes on out there that some people have no idea about.
No clue. And I'll tell you something too. One of the things I learned, words, how powerful words are, and the energy they have, and the effect. That's got to be one of the. I mean, sitting here thinking that story right there. Like I said, it didn't scare me. It bothered me. It bothered me like the little lost Bigfoot, thing in the thing. I mean, stuff like this weighs on me because I think there's a kindness that we should adhere to. If someone's in trouble or human beings in trouble, I mean, I'm going to help them as much as I can, And to me, ghosts are human beings just in need of help. So I've always been hardwired that way, and animals for sure. I'll go to the earth to help.
We've talked about that. There's different kind of ghosts and different kind of energies and different kinds of spirits. There's residual hauntings, there's active hauntings, there's poltergeists, there's demonic activity, and it can all seem the same and it can overlap.
Yep.
And then there are animal ghosts. I've got stories in one of my books about a coon dog, a hunting dog that came back, and everybody saw it except the guy that owned it, that loved it, and then they would see it going just around the corner of the house, and they'd run around the corner, and it wasn't there. They'd see it at the edge of the woods, and then it wouldn't be there. But I had a friend who had a cat that passed away, and sometimes when I was over there visiting, if you were sitting, in the dark watching a movie or something, sometimes you would feel a cat brush up against your leg, and there was no living cat there.
Right. And I think that has a lot to do, too, with love connection, because we talked about energy, because I was doing a show one night with Tony and Jenny from Real Ghost Stories Online, and I've known them for years. And I remember when Tony didn't even have that show, he had another radio show, and he just started doing ghost stories around Halloween, decided he liked it and wanted to try to do all the time, and now he puts out like videos 2 or 3 times a week, I think. But anyway, so they would call me when they had some weird stuff. They go, Sysco, did you ever hear about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, man, you don't mess with that, He's like, Jenny would be like, Tony, quit it, But because she, she went and took some courses on ancient entities and things like that. And I'm like, man, see, I told you. And she made him quit messing around with stuff. He took it a little more serious. But yeah, that's the truth. I mean, it's the reason I told that whole story is it sounds funny now, but I learned a lot from that. I learned basically how much good can have power over dark, which is why I try so hard not to do anything to punch holes in that, because I've got my stuff.
I believe in whatever you want to call it, the law of sowing and reaping, or the karmic law, or the threefold law, or whatever you want to call it. And that's a concept that crosses all religions and boundaries, that whatever you do comes back to you. And I like the law of sowing and reaping, because if you sow a kernel of corn, you don't get a kernel of corn back. You get a corn stalk, and it's got maybe half a dozen ears, and then each one of those ears has hundreds of kernels on it. So be careful what you sow, because you're going to reap. So sow something that you want to get back a lot of.
At 100%. I was talking about words too. I mean, that one. I've had a couple of stories and a couple of people that I've met that. Gosh, I could just learn from everybody, when you talk to them and you have conversations, and then you go back and, like I said, you go back over all your data, your information or whatever, and start looking at things with different eyes and see how deep it might go, a little deeper than you thought, But I was listening to this story of a man, and then I went and got his book, and then I, looked into some more stuff that he had done. And it was amazing. I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyhow, he was talking about this. He was extremely religious, very, very kind man. And I mean religious in the way of, he was a very spiritual man, and he was involved in the church, just a really nice guy. And he really devoted a lot of time to trying to do things right and raise his family right and everything. And he was just kind, just a kind man. He was talking it and walking it, and I really liked that about him. And he moved into this house, and things started, actually, no, he didn't move into he moved in a house that he grew up in. His mom had passed, and he bought the house. That's what it was. He had been in there as a child. And his mom had these abilities, but he never understood him, and she never really described anything to anybody. She just kind of kept everything to herself, and like sometimes she'd be sitting on the couch crying and say, "What's wrong?" And she says, "Well, this lady's here, and she's so sad, and I'm picking up on that." And, and they just kind of, "Oh, Mom," and didn't pay much attention. And then once she had passed, he moved in with his family, and he started picking up on the stuff that was happening. And it was just a regular old haunting, it was just a lady that had been there that lived in a house before this house was ever built, from like the 20s. And just a kind spirit, that was kind of waiting for somebody who never showed up. Her sadness was so deep, and I think she died pregnant, and, it was just an awful story, but she wasn't an angry ghost that went around and caused a lot of problems. And then there was this guy that he had never known from being a kid, or hadn't his mom or anybody mentioning him. It was like a new thing to him. And he starts trying to figure out what happened. Well, the reason I heard about this guy is he called one of my friends, who's fantastic. I mean, she is unbelievable. And pretty famous. And he calls her, and he got her number, and she answered, and they started talking, and she said, "Well, I don't have to be there." She goes, "Let me just open up and see what's going on." Very remote viewing type, and pulling on the energy. And she describes the lady ghost to a T. And he said, "That's exactly how my mother described her." So he's clicking on that, okay? But who's this other guy? And it turns out this is a young man, and she's trying to, and the guy won't talk to her. So he's trying to block her. She said, "I'm getting blocks." He's mad. He's mad at you. You've chained him here. He said, "What do you mean I've chained him here? I don't have anything to do with anybody." She says, "I don't know any kid that, a young man," because the guy was around in his young 20s, 20-something, early 20s. And, it was a car accident. She goes, "Maybe the car accident was close to you." And she's trying to pull on it, but she's only getting snippets because the ghost is blocking her. So it took a little time. 2 or 3 phone calls later, she's picking up on it, and she says, she gives him some things to go look up. She goes, "I'm picking up this, and here's a name. I'm getting the color green. I'm getting this. I'm getting a street. I'm getting a date." He finds out, he goes around, he collects information. He starts finding out there was a car accident. And it was about a mile from his house. And she said, "Well, maybe he was just drawn there because sometimes, for people in the chat, I don't know if you know this, but sometimes ghosts who are earthbound will be drawn into other houses that have ghosts because they're there. They're drawn by the energy, like moths to a flame, or to, like when you turn on your back porch light and all of a sudden all these bugs show up around the light. They're drawn to the light. But they're not necessarily all aware of all the other bugs either. Does that make sense? I guess that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, so he's in there. He doesn't know about the lady ghost. The lady ghost doesn't know much about this guy. She's seen him, but she doesn't pay much attention to him because he don't talk much, is what it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
This is what he found out. The guy who's the ghost, he took care of the lady ghost, and my friend got across it. It was cool. But she didn't want to leave without him because she said, "If I leave, he's going to take off and he's going to get stuck." And I've been stuck for a long time, and I don't want to see that happen to anybody. See, kindness. Even dead human beings are kind to each other sometimes. So he had to work on this guy. It turned out this guy was in a car accident. he was being stupid. He was drunk, and he ran and hit another car. He died when he hit on impact, but he hit another car and caused a whole family to go to the hospital, and one of them had died. And the man who was telling the story was in his home, and he heard about the accident. And being a father of two, he was so outraged by what this young man had done. Not only did he take his own life being frivolous and careless and reckless, but he had harmed another family and put some of them in the hospital, and he cursed the guy. You know, he didn't do it like, I curse you and put this on your... He cursed the guy's name, and he was pounding the table, and he put so much energy in his words.
Now that's a generational curse. That's one that carries on down the bloodline.
Yep.
Those can be broken, but those are the hardest to deal with, from what I understand. I'm not in that business, but I know some people that do that sort of thing.
But see, that's the thing. That's what she was saying. And he was so angry at this guy, he couldn't get away from him because he had basically bound him to him by cursing him and doing that kind of thing. So words have power, guys. Even if you don't know it, just do yourself a favor. Don't do it for me. Do it for yourself. Think about what you say. And if you've got a chance to say something nice, say it. But that is about, I want to say that is about a dozen times I've heard that's happened. And the person had no idea that they had done that. You know, words have power, people. They really do.
Yep.
You know,
and what you confess, you can draw things to you, you can keep them away from you.
Yep. It's weird, right?
And then,
but that's two of the biggest
words carry weight, and what you say toward other people and to other people counts into that equation too. So,
I mean, it sounds crazy. I know all this stuff sounds crazy. I mean, you know, I just sat here and said I had a friend who put her husband in a bottle. I mean, I know how it sounds. I mean,
and I dated a girl who had her ex in a bean pot, but you know that's not the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I don't know what that says about us.
That kind of stuff will make you quit calling up a woman on, you know, for a date. You know, it's like, well, if your ex is in a bean pot, what might you do?
First and only date, just in case. No, it wasn't due to that in particular, but it was just, you know, a number of things.
I mean, we laugh, but you know what? We think about this, and you know, I mean, you got to think. We don't know everything. I don't know everything. Listen, guys, I've been studying, like I said, 50 years. I can tell you right now, I don't. Like I said in the beginning, I don't know that much, you know. And I've been digging, and I mean, it's like a full-time thing for me, you know. And just when you think you get it, boy, something else will happen that
you get one answer maybe, and then it comes with 12 questions attached.
100%. It's like that. We call it the paranormal onion, don't we, Steve? It's amazing the layers that you peel back, and another layer, another layer, another layer. And but I think that's so fascinating. But of course, if you think about it, words would have power. I think the thing I'm surprised at is that, you know, I was comfortable with thinking it's intent. You know, like we talked about the Ouija board. Well, my intent is not to do harm. I want to, you know, do something around. My intent is to have fun. My intent is to try to contact whoever's in the house. My intent is this, you know. And I think it's somehow deeper than that, because this man didn't have any intent on binding that poor man to him. I mean, this guy is waking up and seeing an apparition floating above him, screaming at him, face to face, you know, and holding him down in bed, just screaming at him because he was just as angry at him for holding him back, you know, and not being able to verbalize it. You know, as a ghost, verbalized what he wanted to say to this guy, and this guy's just getting scared, you know, and had no idea. And if it wasn't for the medium that was able to unravel that mess, it'd still be going on, you know. And it amazes me. It's just a fascinating subject. You know, it's real cool to talk about, you know, goes at Lincoln coming back and Churchill standing there naked and being able to hold himself together, to say something as cool as he did.
And that was just such a Churchill type thing to say.
Yeah.
That totally, even if that's a made up story, it's him to the T.
Yeah, to a T. Yeah, and I mean, it's just enduring either way. I'll take it. It's a beautiful story. But, there's a lot of ugly stuff that happens too. I mean, like that one woman, I watched a woman over 3 times, like I said, I had nothing to do with it. My job was to hold out the bad so she could do the good that this woman needed. But to watch her physically change the way she did was absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. And if people can do that, if people can take that kind of stuff off and do that kind of good, more power to them. But then again, somebody had to do it to her. Did she do it to herself? Did her ancestors do it to herself? I mean, supposedly it went way back to a curse that was put on her ancestors because they were slave owners. And the slave owner, I guess one of the hands or I don't know who it was, but had, I guess, got her pregnant. And when she was, she had the baby, they took it and they killed it. And that's a powerful curse. You don't get away with this stuff, folks. You don't come out clean, so don't do bad things because things will follow your bloodline.
Absolutely. And
it's awful.
Stuff you do can affect your future generations like that, too.
Absolutely.
Your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, kids, relatives you may never even know or see can still suffer from things you've done if you carry that kind of weight around or put it on them.
The sins of your father.
Yeah, I was just hoping you read my mind there, Sysco. Just opening my mouth to say that.
Yep, sins of your father. And I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, and I've seen that kind of thing, and I think back, man. So think about, I guess what you can pull away from tonight is like what's scary. There's a lot of scary stuff out there, depending on what you want to look at, But if you're going to err on the side of good, if you can, try to do as much good because, if we're wrong, then we're wrong. You did a bunch of good stuff, and
well,
but
even in some of the dark magic, Aleister Crowley, if it harm none, do what thou will. That's there you go. That's another tenet of most religions. You don't do anything that can hurt somebody, or that that your will is not supposed to overwhelm somebody else's.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't think that people realize how much you're actually harming yourself too. Mm-hmm. And there is going to be something on the other side.
There's a karma or a return or a reaping and a sowing or whatever you want to call it there. It comes back, and usually in spades. So only do things that are good, and then you've got good coming back. You sow that good crop.
Right. And some of the most fascinating things too, other than that stuff, was I think it's the most I don't know. I don't even know if there's a word for it that I've seen is people that have done things that they regret and they've crossed over and come back as a ghost or what I call a visitation, a spirit, somebody that comes back like you get a visitation, get a visitation of somebody who has crossed over and they want to come back for a reason. That's a different kind of, it's not an earthbound spirit.
So unfinished business type haunting.
I wanted what people think, like that one guy I told you the story about, that he actually is like, we got some bad stuff's happening. The remote controls flying across the room. We got this, the easy chair flipped over and the tables, we need help. So you go in there and you start unraveling, you try to figure out what's going on, and then finally you find out, if you get a chance, if you have a spirit that will communicate, because some of them won't, and some of them can't, for whatever reason. And this one did, and he actually told us that he wasn't there to scare anybody. He was there to try to stop the guy, because the guy was really deep into drugs. He started selling drugs, and he was starting to succumb to an addiction toward the drugs. His wife was suffering. His kids were suffering. and he was just going down the same path this guy had. And basically, he came back to stop him from doing the same thing he did. He said, man, you don't want to wind up like I wasted my entire life. And now I'm here, and I'm, you know, and he, the way he described it was, he said, I had to see everything I did, and I had to live through the pain I caused other people and see how it affected them. You don't want to do this, man. I'm here to help you, and that's going to help me.
That goes back to like Dickens' Christmas Carol, or It's a Wonderful Life, you know, where he goes back and gets to see how many lives he affected and in what way. Yes.
I've heard I've heard that more and more. I mean, I've had them, you know, people that are very close to me, that has happened to too, where, you know, they're standing there and I'm talking to one of my friends and something like that. And they're going, hang on a minute, I got to go over there and talk to him. And it would happen to be my son. And there was a young boy following him around his age. They were teenagers. And she says, I got to tell you this. You got this guy behind you. And he's trying to talk to you, but he doesn't know how to communicate, and you're not listening. And, you know, he's trying to get you. Basically, he was trying to help him and help his friend. And his friend was really going down. He was circling the drain. He was getting caught up in bad things. And he was trying to get him to help the other one not go down the same path. And to go and tell his parents that he did not die of an OD. That he didn't commit suicide. It was an accidental overdose of something. That they thought his parents thought he committed suicide. He did. And he wanted him to tell him that, you know. But his part of that, because of all the stuff he had been in, he had to come back and help some other people. And I could say, that's cool. If you get a chance to do that, that's, you know, wow. You see how much deeper all this is. It's not just, you know what I mean? The stuff is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So, you know, try to do what you can here. I mean, everything we're going through right now, this pandemic, I'm telling you right now, I'm talking to mediums like crazy, and they're calling me, and I usually give them, you know, a lot of love back. And it's like, we're just trying to pass through as much love as possible and high vibrational stuff. And, you know, there's so much going on right now, and I'm sure everybody can feel the feeling. And it's not just the fear, and it's not just the unknown, invisible enemy that's going around. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of energy.
Yeah. And I think another thing, and for a lot of us, this is the first big thing like this that we've had to face in our lifetimes. And I think about my grandparents, you know, they went through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, cholera, smallpox, the Spanish flu, tuberculosis. You know, they survived all that, and part of that time they didn't even have electricity or running water. You know, a lot of it, but they knew what to do. They knew how to use things, how to use herbs, how to use, if nothing else, common sense, you know, to get through. And, you know, they farmed and they hunted and they did what they had to do, but they made it. And, you know, just, we as people will get through this, but you can't panic. You got to keep your head about you, and don't do things that you know are going to, you know, don't take, that's not a good time to take risks, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Right. And it's just, you know, try to do as much, you know, good as you can. I mean, spend time with your loved ones. I mean, you know, that's easy to say. You know, we both have a friend right now that's he's in a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, 8 stories up, with an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, and his wife is panicking like crazy. And he's just like, Sysco, get me out of here. And I'm like, man, you had him. You deal with him, you know. But, you know, it's hard. Everybody's going through it. It's a fear thing. And the best thing to do is just, if you can, think of anything you could do to ground. I know Steve was mentioning that, too. It's like, dance barefoot, even if it's in your kitchen. Put on good music and dance. You know, get your vibration.
Music, put something on that makes you feel good. Right. Watch happy videos. You know, you can put yourself in a mood. I've ordered a guitar. I want to pick up the. I've played. It's been years since I've owned one, but I'm going to take this time. Of course, I self-isolate all the time anyway. Just the writer and the personality that I have. I'm very introverted. You might not believe it to hear me on here, But I don't go out much anyway, and this is just another reason for me not to have to leave the house. And nobody will think anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I know people are scared, money and jobs and everything. It's a tough time.
it's scary. I'm lucky in that regard. I work from home full time and have for several years, and I've got my writing and my voiceover work and my film scripts and my radio work and stuff. So I'm not affected by it, but I do. Oh, I feel immensely for the people that are, and I wish there was something I could do for each and every one of them.
Well, all you can do is put out good energy.
Yeah, that's
like I said,
I'm putting out good vibes. I'm doing stuff like this, doing the streams, listen to the rain, listen to the campfire and the crickets. Get your mind out of that space and into a better place, and that can help. And if nothing else, it makes time a little more bearable.
Work in the yard. Get outside if you can. If you're in a situation, you can get outside and work in your yard. If you can't, go outside, do something, plant some flowers on your, go down maybe if you can get them.
Yeah.
Go, plant something. If you can't, take some of your fruit, take some seeds out of your fruit and out of your peppers and plant some garlic and plant some, look up online for all the different vegetables that you can, plant easy.
And then there's other people like us, Jen J, 71 there, saying that, she keeps herself locked away, so this is what she's used to. And there are a lot of people. This is hard, and especially if I've heard some people on Facebook saying, I'm not used to being around my family this much, and they're driving me crazy.
Yeah, and that's rough. But you've got to find some stuff that around you. If you can get back to nature of any kind, even just sticking your hands in the dirt, like planting a potato or something.
Yeah, go out in the garage, take a walk around the outside of the house, or go visit the other rooms in the house or something. It's easy for me to sit here and make recommendations without knowing every individual situation, but you've got to find your happy space that you can get yourself into as best you can.
Try to put some good energy out there into the world because we need it right now. It's
Bill in the chat. He's using the missing persons and mysteries. Log in there. I'm actually logged into that too, but I try not to type with it so people doesn't confuse us. I've been using 13 past midnight, but there's Bill. Bill, welcome in, buddy. You're just a little late. We're only about 2 hours and 45 minutes in.
Yes, that's the thing. If we could do that, ground and just try to put good energy back out, like laughter. Laughter's funny. Look up some jokes and just tell stupid jokes till you make everybody laugh. Because laughter is such a high lifting thing. You know what I mean? We're talking about energy and all that stuff. That's like some of the best advice I can give. It's not easy to do, but you find a way to do it, and that's pretty cool. And that's what I've had the privilege. Again, everything I've said tonight sounds so crazy. You say that, but I do
that sometimes. I'll say it out loud and I'm like, that made no sense, and people think I'm nuts now, but it made sense to me when I thought it.
It's just, just think about the things I've said in the past 2 hours. So anyway, but I'm going to say something else crazy too. Anytime I've had the privilege of getting advice from the dead on living, it's always been love and, appreciate the things that you have around you. Appreciate your loved ones. Tell those that you love them, but try to be a decent person because they say basically you're gonna see your life and how you lived it and, just trying to be a good man or a good woman and just trying to be a decent person and trying to raise your vibration up.
And that's how I've tried to live. I've tried to treat people the way I want to be treated, and that hasn't always worked out so good for me. But at night, when I do sleep, I don't sleep much, just I'm insomniac. But when I do lay down and go to sleep, I've got a clear conscience. I'm not laying there worried about things that I've said or done or people I've hurt or anything. That's your reward for at least treating other people right. You don't have those regrets. You don't have, carry that around with you.
100%, man. And if you're going to be a jerk and wind up cutting somebody's foot off with an axe, you probably wind up in a bottle at the bottom of a lake.
And justifiably so.
You didn't count on that, did you? Just saying. I felt, whoa, man, that's just, wow. you know. But it's not the first time I heard, stuff like that. And I just, like I said, I didn't want to be any part of any of that mess, because me, I'd have crossed them over. It's like, yeah, you got to deal with it. See, to me, that's like cheating. If reincarnation is possible, I don't know if it's possible, but if you made me pick right now, yes or no, I'd have to say I have more evidence and knowledge of yes that I would know, because of all the kids that come through, past life regression, and kids that come through and they can describe the intricate inside of a B-1 bomber from World War II, and then you look back and that person really did exist and the plane really did go down here. That's like, wow, how would a 5-year-old know that? And there's 1,000 stories like that. 1,000 stories, extremely intriguing. And then I've heard so many of, we've gone through, we all seem to come through the same soul group. I know you and I have talked about that before, where if you have all these people that kind of decide we're going to go back through and we're going to try to get this right, we're trying to do this better, or we're going to try to experience it this way and see if we can deal with that better. And when you think about stuff like that, you try to hold yourself more accountable for the things you do. We talked about things that you say. When I heard that story and I really started clicking in with that, I'm thinking, my gosh, things I've said. I hope I don't have somebody, to make somebody stuck, because at that right time I said something when they were passing out, and words, who knew, when you think about it, it's extremely intriguing, and it'll make you be careful. It'll make you think about what you say and what your actions are. I know a man that, this guy's pretty famous. I don't want to say his name, but if you know the story, that's who I'm talking about. He was hit with, again, it's going to sound nuts. He was struck by lightning and killed. Near-death experience, let's put it that way. 3 times. 3 times. You figure once. You know what I mean? Once is, okay, he can get struck by lightning and go through a near-death experience and be revived and survive that. That's possible. Twice. Where are you hanging out? What are you doing getting hit by lightning twice, and it happens 3 times? And each time he had his near-death experience, it was a little bit different. Like he went deeper, almost. Kind of crazy. And the last time, I think he was out like an incredible amount of time. Like 10, 15 minutes past the time that everybody says that you're just not going to come back, right? Mm-hmm. He changed his whole life. He said he was a jerk. He was a Marine. He went through wars. He went through that whole thing of being a soldier and having to do those things that soldiers have to do in combat. And he went through all of that and everything else. And when the first time happened, it wasn't enough. He went through. He had to see all that stuff, and he had to relive it and see how the other person felt and how it affected everything. Everything's a domino effect. You hurt somebody or you yell at somebody. Say you yell at somebody in the grocery store, and he tells his story. You get mad at the clerk in the grocery store because they didn't do something right or whatever, and you yell at them. Well, you don't know why that person's having a bad day or messing up. And then they trigger and do something next, and that person does something. It's domino effect. Yeah. Everything affects everybody.
Vicious cycle there. Like the old Native American tenet of, don't judge a man till you walked a mile in his moccasins.
100%. But see, he said, the thing that got me was, he said, here's the thing that I learned the 3rd time. I'm responsible for all of that. Not just the clerk I yelled at, but because my actions caused that one. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. Think about it. He said the worst thing after it, all the things he did as a soldier, things that he did being rotten to his family, and he had fights with his brother and stuff, and they weren't talking, and that's fixed now. But all the things, he said the worst thing he ever did, he was in a hurry to get to a party and hit a dog. And he knew he could have gone back there trying to help that dog, and he didn't. And he went on to the party because he was so arrogant and so in a hurry, and everything he was doing was so important. He didn't stop back. And he said that was the hardest thing I ever had to relive, was the suffering that dog had. Now think about that. That's incredible. So,
and
like
then
you said,
that dog was probably somebody's pet that they loved, maybe depended on. It could have been, their kid's pet. And then how did that trickle down? It's just amazing. It's the butterfly effect there when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It'll make you think about your actions. So, like the guy that, said things and cursed that kid, that could have very well been just upset or drunk and thinking that he could make it, or showing off, or had a fight with his girlfriend and took off and went through that stop sign and hurt those people. I mean, we don't mean to do these things. If we could look out on the outside of it and look in, man, we wouldn't have done it, when you look at the after effect, the hindsight of it. And I think that's like the number one thing I've ever learned from the dead is how to look at life different. I certainly wasn't expecting to find all this stuff out about energy and connecting into energy. And that's why it gave me such a chill to sit down with those elders and have them tell that guy, shh, we don't talk. And then I see people messing around and doing the things that they... How many movies does everybody watch where it's like Candyman, or whatever, into the mirror? It's real fun while you're doing it. Wait till he shows up.
And there's always somebody in the movie, don't do that. Whatever you do, don't do that. And then they do
That was me. That was me. I'm going back to the bar and get a beer, man. Y'all have fun. That's how I always was, because I learned young that this stuff really does happen, And I don't, like I said, I don't know why I was getting ready to touch that Ouija board, but I really wanted to know if my mom was around and that she was okay, because any grieving child, of course, is going to want to know.
But then later on, you ended up having a visitation from her anyway. So.
Yep, found out anyway. But I think, like I said, it would be presumptuous of me to think that it was her knocking it off, like, you're not touching that, It could, like I said, it could have been somebody protecting my friend. It could have been, spirit guides, angels. It could have been just somebody, jerking us around. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'll never know, but I knew enough not to touch them. And, I have plenty of people all the time. I just did an interview with a really famous wrestler, a really nice guy. And he said, Sysco, he says, I want to go I'm going to a house and I get to stay there. We're doing an investigation. I'm staying there for 3 days. He goes, I really want to do this. And he said, do you recommend that I use a Ouija board? Because I'm thinking that's what I'm going to take with me. I'm like, no. And then I see him in the chat. He goes, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm like, okay, have fun. You know where to find me if you need help. It wouldn't be the first time I had somebody like that call me, big burly guy called me up. He's like, you don't understand. It's awful. I know. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun, and I didn't expect to tell some of the stories I did, but sometimes I'd seen in the chat somebody very wise in there said sometimes we're not ready to know things yet.
Yeah.
And that's the wisest thing I've heard in a long time. It's very true, because along in your journey, you hear these things, and then like 10 years later, it'll make sense to you, or 20 years later, or, whatever, because
things happen in their own time and in their own way and at their own pace. Yep. Swedish Mom just want to say good night. She sends greetings there, Sysco. Merritt, I hope you have a good night. Thanks for stopping by. Watch the playback. We're right up on 3 hours here. Sysco and I, once we get together, we don't know when to quit.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, if you guys go to bed, I can get off of here. But it's been really wonderful talking to y'all. I didn't expect I had other stories I was going to tell, but like I said, sometimes...
Yeah, I had more that I was going to tell, but sometimes the characters you were talking about in a novel take on their own life. Yeah. Stories here did too. It went the way it was supposed to go, and I hope that somebody out there somewhere that I said something that they needed to hear.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's the way it goes.
You never know somebody else's heart or their spirit or what they're going through. So if there's, hopefully I've said something somewhere that somebody took to heart and it gave them a little bit of joy or happiness and made them laugh or smile. I've done my job then, even if I scared you a little bit, that's part of it too. But
Yeah,
I gave you some emotion off of it, so.
Exactly, man. It's like I said, especially in these times too. People get bored and they start doing stuff and whatever, and I don't want anybody to just go in and try to figure out stuff. There's always people out there that can help you if you've got a haunting or got questions like that. I've had many people call me and ask. I had one yesterday. She said, I've got a situation here. I said, don't tell me any more about it. Hang on. I can tell by your energy that, there's something like this going on, but you're about to ask me if I know somebody that can connect that for you. So I don't want to know any details because I don't want that person to think that I called this person. I said, well, this, and this, and this. And then you're questioning the information you're getting. So don't give me any detail.
No.
I can tell by your energy. This is what you need. Hang on. I'm going to ask you two things. Give me a yes or no, and then I'll know who to call. And I gave her 3 names, and she hooked up with all 3 of them. And she could have hooked up with one of them, got the answer she got, but she hooked up with all 3 of them. I said, you're in good hands, man. You're good to go. We do that all the time.
Sometimes you just know it. Back years ago when I used to read tarot cards, I don't do that anymore because that's another thing that can carry a weight, that it takes away from you. And if you're not getting that back, you can deplete your own energies. But I didn't even need the cards. A lot of times I knew the question before they were even asked. I knew the answer. The cards were a concrete tool to show an abstract concept, to explain it. Because if they just come in and I'm like, yeah, well, it's this, 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 and this, they're just going to look at me like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude. But if I'm laying out the cards, and the cards would agree, that was the thing about the cards. If you're good at them and you work with them, what it's going to show in the cards. And that was the amazing thing to me about it, because I knew what the cards were going to show, and they did. But it's that kind of energy, and you know how to help people. Likewise, people that are empathic like that, you have to guard yourself. I mean, I can walk through a restaurant. I can tell who's mad, who's happy, who's pissed off, who's, everything going on. Same with going into a hospital or nursing home. Everybody in those places, without having any knowledge of it, it's like they're emotional or psychic vampires. They're trying to pull that energy off. It's like we've talked about it being like the moth and the flame. They see that light. Their spirit sees that light that you're giving off, and they want a part of it. And until you learn how to guard yourself and protect yourself against that, it can affect you. You can drain yourself down to the point that you'll get physically ill.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, you've got to refuel. Try to get away from all this. If you're picking up something or watching something that's causing a bunch of fear, stop doing it. Stop doing it. Because everything is on a fear frequency. It's very high. It's 480 hertz. They call that fear frequency. You've got to get your different frequency going. So like I said, sing, act silly, make funny hats, do puppet shows, do crafts, do silly jokes, pull up something on, online and just keep telling silly jokes. I once, look, man, I'm going to tell you something. There was a guy I know, and the lady, he was trying to help. And she didn't want anybody else to come in. And he was trying to tell her, look, I know people that can come in here and do this lickety-split. I don't want anybody to come in, blah, blah, blah. She said, I trust you. So he said, okay. And she said, this is what we're going to do. She had a very nasty, it was a human ghost. It wasn't an entity. And he didn't know how to do it on his own. But this thing was mean. It was just a mean human to past, and you don't just magically change. I don't know if you want me to say it, but I call them ass souls. I mean, if you were an ass when you were alive, you probably would have been an asshole when you died.
An ass soul, I like that.
Yeah. So that's what I call them. But I'm like, because if you're a jerk, you don't normally just change like that. If you're earthbound, I mean, if you cross over and you go through whatever it is you go through, then then maybe absolutely. But you're not if you're earthbound, you're still here. So anyhow, that was the situation, and he got rid of that ghost he got a joke book, and they just sat on the couch and they just told jokes back and forth and laughed and laughed and laughed till the thing couldn't in the room anymore. Which is why when we were talking about the black-eyed kids, I started singing Jeremiah was a bullfrog and dancing around like a nut, because you change the energy and they can't be near it. It backs them, at least that's the only thing I know so far that seems to work, so far.
You need to put that on a t-shirt. Sysco, don't be an ass soul.
Don't be an asshole. You're gonna die. It's like crazy, right?
You're cracking the chat up there. They're loving that.
Everything we said tonight just sounds so good. Can we just erase this and start over? Because everything I've said tonight just sounds like absolutely.
Yeah,
Get my book, people.
If
You're gonna
got another 3 hours, we'll just start at the beginning. Hey, folks, how you doing tonight? Welcome in. We've got a good show for you.
I got some really nice, cute
Sysco and I, we've got that same wavelength going on. I think we're related somehow. It's the first time we ever talked. Soraya had told me, there's somebody you need to talk to, and it was Sysco. She had gone onto his show and told some of her stories. And the very first time we talked, it was like talking to somebody, an old dear friend that I hadn't talked to in years, and we were getting caught up. The first time we talked for 4 or 5 hours, I think it was, Sysco.
I think so.
I remember it was spring or summertime. I was sitting out on my back porch, and it was daylight when we started and well after dark when we finished up. And that's just the first time. I mean, we're just getting warmed up here. We could do another 3 hours easy. But I will have her back sometime if she would honor us with her presence again. Cisco's always a good guest.
If the chat would like to have me back, I'll absolutely come back and do this again. I mean, if you want a theme, I could come up with some more stuff. Like I said, I know a lot of people. Most of the things I've told you tonight, it certainly isn't my wisdom. It's a collective wisdom of many wise people that I've been graced with in my life. I don't know anything.
And this took some twists and turns. A lot of the stories I thought you'd tell and ones that I'd planned on telling, we never got to them. So we can definitely do a part 2 to this. And after Sysco signs off, I am going to play the Black Eyed Kids interview that Tanya Jones did with me, just because I told people that I would play that for you. But
charge your phones, people. Put your locks in. I'm telling you right now, bad things are going to happen. I'm telling you.
And Bill says in the chat there, you have an open invitation to come back.
Oh, that's so sweet.
He said if you want, he'll put the "Don't Be an Ass Soul" on the merch and share the revenue with you. So.
Absolutely, I definitely want one. Don't be, maybe a coffee cup. You put it on a coffee cup. I'd love to have a coffee cup.
He's been listening in the car on the way home. He says, "But yeah, Sysco, thanks again for being with us, for joining us tonight, and stay safe there in New Jersey.
Like I said,
keep your family safe."
Oh yeah, it's rough out here. It really is rough right here.
And don't forget Sysco's book, "We're All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife: A Guided Tour Through a Haunted Life." I got it right. It's a mouthful. Usually it's just the first time I stumble on, and I helped co-author it, and I can't get the name right. But it was one of those things I kept after Sysco, like, you got to write a book, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And finally she's like, I'll do it, but you're coming with me. So she did the heavy lifting. I went along behind her, and I tried to rein myself in and just do like a little color commentary or stuff, whatever you want to call it, after each thing there, because I didn't want to overshadow what she said. I'm telling you, the chapter on Gettysburg and the ghost she encountered there, that's worth the price of the book. It would stand as a book alone, I think. But there's every story in the book is just amazing. And then I get to tell some little ones in there too that just kind of coincided with what she was saying. It's an amazing book. Even if you take my part and throw it away, it's perfect.
No, the best part, I'm going to tell the chat, because a lot of people don't know this, but when I was writing the book, we had another deal, and I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a chapter, and I'm going to send it to you, and you read the chapter, and the first thing that comes into your mind after you read that chapter, I want you to write that. If it's an anecdote it reminded you of, or if it touched you in some way, and you want to reflect on that, that's fine too. And then we printed it, and I never changed a word he said. But that's the way it was. It was in stone. And I thought that was such a neat way to do that, because when we talk like this is what happens, and he'll be reminded of something. He says something. So I didn't want it. It's an enduring conversation flow, and I wanted the book to have that too. So that's exactly the way it's written. And
it's just like we're talking here now. You tell a story, and I come along behind you, and
Yep.
say, yeah, what she said, but it's a little more than that.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a sweet little book. Like I said, I wrote it for people when I was young. I was looking for stuff to kind of make me feel like I wasn't completely nuts, which I still haven't figured out yet. But when you're having experiences and you're seeing ghosts and they're talking to you and things are happening, you want to know from others. And we just didn't have the information, in the 60s. It was hard to get that information. And, we didn't have internet. You had to go to libraries. And, I'd go to the library and they go, there are no true ghost stories. And I mean, that's actually true. But, it's hard to find information. And I wanted to put out a book that people could read that have a little bit of everything in it. So if you've had an experience or you have a question about something, maybe there's something in there. I mean, I tried to do it as true to as it happened. So you could hear it, the way it smelled, the way it sounded, the way it affected, the way it affected pets around me and stuff like that. So you could look into it and match it up to yours and maybe try to help other people figure it out, because if we don't do this, then, my heart goes out to kids that have abilities and don't know what to do with them.
Absolutely.
And then start trying to figure out, let's play with the Ouija board to figure out what's going on. It was like, oh my gosh. And then, my friends and I get phone calls and we're like, oh God, get the sage. Here we go. But anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to y'all, and just remember, words and everything else, and be kind to one another. Be kind to yourself. Don't forget self-care. That's very important, and, like I said, take care of yourself. You don't want to wind up in a bottle at the end of a river somewhere.
There you go. Sysco, thanks again. Glad you're
Have a
with
good
us
one. Be
tonight.
blessed.
And we'll see you again real soon, I have a feeling. I turned the campfire off in the background. Looked like YouTube was buffering really hard. The campfire would look like a slideshow on my phone here, so I've just left the fog on. So still got the fire and the cricket noise. I'm going to go ahead. I promised some people earlier that I would play my Black Eyed Kids interview. I'm going to go ahead and do that
Black-eyed kids. Who or what are they? Are they aliens, as some believe, similar to the men in black, or something darker, possibly demonic? My guest today is author, narrator, Black-eyed kids. Who or what are they? Are they aliens, as some believe, similar to the men in black, or something darker, possibly demonic? My guest today is author, narrator, and filmmaker Steve Stockton, aka 13 Past Midnight, who has some amazing true paranormal encounters over on his channel, and we're going to discuss the black-eyed children phenomena.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking.
So I understand you've had a black-eyed kids encounter.
Yes, I have. Happened back in the late 90s. Very, very frightening. And I've been fairly hesitant to talk about it.
Why have you been hesitant to talk about it?
Well, I'm part Cherokee on my father's side, and there are certain things that the elders of the tribes will tell you that you just don't talk about. There are certain entities that they believe in, which they just don't discuss. And the fear there is that, almost like a tulpa, that by talking about it, you give it more energy and you can actually draw it to you. So I imagine it's more out of superstition than anything else, but because it was such a frightening episode, that's why I've been hesitant to talk about it, although I have a few times. And usually with some very strange results thereafter.
What happens when you have spoken of it?
Well, as odd as it sounds, there's usually some sort of paranormal activity that goes along with that. First time I ever talked about it publicly was on Art Bell's show. And Art was sick that night, and his producer, Heather Wade, had taken over the show. And she kind of knew little bits and pieces about the story. Her and I talk apart from the show. We're good friends and spent a lot of time talking on the phone. And she kind of goaded me live on the show into telling it. And it was a wonderful experience being on Art Bell's show, even though Art wasn't on there at the time, unfortunately. He did call in during one of the mini breaks, tell us what a good show we were doing, and it was right after I'd told the black-eyed kids story. But usually, like I said, something paranormal happened that night after I talked about it. After the show was over and I had wound down and gone to bed, I heard a scream in the house. The house is pitch dark. The only person's there with me, my daughter, and my dog. It was weird. It sounded like the scream started outside and then continued into the house. Like, say somebody were out on the front porch, began screaming, ran into the house and out the back door. Well, I have perimeter alarms. I have motion detectors. I have things well under control as far as security is concerned. None of the alarms were tripped. None of the motion lights came on. None of the perimeter alarms have been tripped. First thing I thought of was, something's happened with my daughter. So I ran into her room, knocked on the door, banged on the door, opened up the door, and she's sound asleep. And did you hear a scream? And she's like, no. And she said, but I told you not to talk about those damn black-eyed kids. So that was just one of the first things. Another time I told the story, I had a strange knocking at the door in the middle of the night that happened 2 or 3 times. Again, nothing on the security camera, nothing alarm-wise, nothing, the perimeter alarms, the motion alarms, nothing went off. But there was a very distinct, loud knock at the door on 3 separate occasions. Most recently, there's been a couple other times in there, minor instances of paintings falling off the wall and things like that. The most recent incident, I told it live on Facebook in a group that you and I are part of. You know what I'm talking about. And that night, a dining fly or a rain fly that I had set up out in the yard under some trees, that I sit out there under that when it's really sunny out or when it's raining hard. I sit out there under that. During the night, after we talked that on Facebook, did that live broadcast, the dining fly had just collapsed. Nothing had fallen on it. Nobody had been around. Again, no perimeter alarms, no motion detection had gone off or anything. But two of the braces, now it was just aluminum, or aluminium as you like to say, but the rivets had snapped in two of the supports and the whole thing had collapsed right where I normally sit. Had I been there at the time, I probably wouldn't have been injured, but it would have been frightened to say the least. So, we'll see what happens after this episode, see if there's anything unusual that happens after this telling of the story.
Can you describe to us what you felt?
Well, when it happened, I felt the most irrational fear that I've ever felt, and I'm not one that scares easy. If you listen to some of my true paranormal encounters on my YouTube channel, or in my third book, My Strange World, that's where I wrote about my personal encounters. I talk about some pretty scary things in there. There have been two, other than the black-eyed children, where I was actually scared, where I was actually frightened. Both basically when I was a child or very young, and that being a story called The Thing in the Ditch, and then another one called The Beast of Swanson Lane. Now, I won't go into retelling those here, but those times I was frightened, scared of whatever it was. But this encounter with the black-eyed kids, it was a totally different kind of fear. I'll go ahead and tell the story here. This is in the late 90s. I was living in East Tennessee at the time, and I worked for a medical management company. We basically had 35 or so remote medical practices that we managed, and the idea behind the medical group was that we'd let the doctors be free to practice medicine, and we would handle the business side of it, the day-to-day. A lot of doctors, brilliant though they are, they don't have good business sense, and they need help running their practices. So that was my normal gig. Well, this is at a time when a lot of the Microsoft certifications and some of that was just coming to the fore. People were just getting those. You could find work without one. There was not really such a thing as a computer science degree at that time, not in the sense that there is now. And I taught myself this. My degrees are actually in English and art. But I'd picked up computers along the way, and that's what I was doing for the medical management group. I did the computers and the networking and kept that all running for the remote sites so the doctors could print their super bills and patient databases and all things like that. It was just the very start of before things were to go paperless. So I taught myself those skills, was working in that as a full-time job, and then I also did like hired gun type work as a network consultant. I would go out and could redo any type of business, and set them up on computers, get them going. Well, there was a place right down the road from where the main office of the medical management group was. It was a comprehensive breast center. I had a friend that had worked there and recommended me to the office manager. They were wanting to update their computer network. So I went in and talked to them, and they offered me the gig at $100 an hour, which even in today's money, that's great, but in late 90s money, that was fantastic. So I took that gig, and what I would do, once I finished my day-to-day work activities for the medical group, I would just pop down the street to the breast center, and I was working on getting their network converted over. They'd been using the old dumb terminals, and were moving toward an actual functioning network where everybody had their own personal PCs at their desk. So I would go in there sometimes after those people had gone home and work till midnight or after, getting this taken care of. It was a several week gig. And I was just finishing up. I think I only had maybe another day or two's work left in there. I was leaving about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had keys to the place and codes to the alarm and everything. I could come and go as I pleased. And I liked being in there, of course, when nobody was there, so I didn't disrupt anyone, and they didn't disrupt me. So I'd locked up, set the alarms. I was leaving. I carried all my stuff out to my car. Now, at the time, I was driving a little Mazda Miata convertible. And I had all this network gear and tools and a spool of Cat 5 cable and things like that I was carrying around with me. I'm carrying all that out with my arms full. And I noticed, and this is in an industrial area, there's not any houses nearby or anything, but I noticed way over on the edge of the parking lot, there's two little girls sitting on the curb. And I'm thinking, well, that's strange. Where this is, in the time of morning to 2 a.m., this isn't a common occurrence. And so I put my stuff down. I'm opening up the car, the trunk. I'd left the top down. It was warm weather. So I'm trying to stow all this gear in the trunk. If you've ever seen a Miata trunk, it's a tiny thing. It's not much bigger than a glove box on a lot of cars. And it's a bit like Tetris to try to fit a lot of stuff in the trunk. So I'm trying to rearrange and arrange things and get them all to fit in the trunk. And I looked over, and they've stood up. I'd say the older one's probably 11 or 12 years old. The younger one was probably, or I say the younger one, it was the smaller one. I couldn't really tell ages, but I would have guessed she was probably 9 or 10. They're just a couple of years difference in ages, I would say. And all of a sudden, the taller one starts talking. Not to me, but about me, to the other one, to the smaller one. And it was almost like a litany. She was saying, and just nonstop, like, he'll give us a ride. He'll let us in his car. He'll have to let us go. He can't leave us out here. We're lost and scared, and it's 2 a.m. He'll have to give us a ride. He'll let us in his car. He's not going to leave us stranded. Just over and over and over and over. And the smaller one didn't say anything. Well, I go back to my task. I'm trying to get stuff fixed in my car so I can get out of here. Well, I glance over again. The taller one is still talking, and they've walked closer to me. They're about halfway across the lot now. It's maybe 80 yards or so, the entire length of the lot. And I didn't see them move, but yet somehow they had moved. I'm still fiddling with my car. I look up again. Now the taller one's still talking. This time, they've closed the distance even more. Again, I didn't see them walk. They were only walking when I wasn't looking, I presume. And now they're under a streetlight. And I can kind of see that they're dressed oddly. They're wearing very plain, very simple clothing. Darkish colored pants, maybe gray. And they're wearing dark hoodies, sweatshirts with the hoods pulled up. And I can't really see the faces. It looks black in there. And the taller one is still talking, 90 miles an hour. He won't leave us out here. He won't leave us stranded. He'll let us in the car. He'll do it. He won't leave us here. He'll let us in. And by this point, I'm really getting spooked because they're getting fairly close now. Well, just as the next time I looked up, they had gotten right under the street lamp. And I could see that they had the biggest, blackest eyes that I'd ever seen. I mean, like, so black as to not exist. It was that type of black, a pitch black. If you've ever been in a cave underground with no lights on, it was that kind of darkness, just an inky blackness for their eyes. And this one's still jabbering. And I felt this fear just start rolling over me in waves. And now, telling the story, it seems so ridiculous. It's two little girls, even though the circumstances are quite odd. It's in a parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody else around. And, I'm thinking, this can't be a good thing. Two girls want to ride in a two-seater car. First of all, I'm not going to put two kids in the seat of a car that's just meant for one person. And don't want to be out running around under those circumstances. 2 o'clock in the morning with two underage girls in a car, but the fear that I felt come rolling off those two, and even now when I talk about it, I get a little antsy. It's like every time I talk about it, I relive it. I go back as I've never felt a fear like that. It was just a real feral fight or flight type thing. The only thing I can liken it to, my cousin Wendell used to have a boa constrictor. And he would feed it live rodents, rats or mice. It wouldn't eat dead ones or frozen ones. it wanted to kill him itself. And I watched him feed it one time, and he put the poor little mouse, or whatever it was, rat, in the enclosure with the snake, and the mouse is just looking around. And then all of a sudden it sits up on its haunches, and it gets the strangest look. And obviously it had sensed the snake or smelled the snake. The snake just slowly comes curling out from under a rock or some vegetation or something that he had in there for it. And the mouse completely froze. It just sat there on its haunches. It stopped twitching its whiskers. It froze just out of pure fear. And then the snake had no problem just coming over, and it kind of smacked it with its head, and stunned it, and then just set about eating it whole. Well, that was kind of how I felt, was like that mouse. There was just such an overwhelming fear that it was really beyond fight or flight. And even as scared as I've been in those other two stories that I talked about, I've never felt a fear like I felt. Just total, insane, irrational fear. So by now, I've gotten my stuff in my car. I got the trunk closed. I'm fumbling with the keys, trying to get the door open. For whatever reason, I'd left the doors locked with the top down. I had trouble getting the door open, so I ended up just jumping over the car door into the car. And by now, they're just within a few feet of the car. And they're just standing there staring at me. And the taller one is still, oh, he'll let us in. He'll give us a ride. He won't leave us out here in the middle of nowhere. We're stranded. We're lost. We're cold. We're wet. It's, late. And I had trouble getting the car started. Finally, roared to life. And by that time, they were right up to the edge of the car. I mean, they could have jumped in the car almost at that point. And I floored the car, and instead of turning left or right and exiting the parking lot as normal, I went down through the grass in the lawn of the place. And there was a little curb there, jumped the curb, went down through the grass and got out on the road that way, and just didn't look back. And at the time, I was dating a girl who only lived 2 or 3 miles away. And usually if I had to work late there, I would spend the night with her so I could be at my other gig for the medical group on time in the mornings. But this night, that didn't even occur to me. I turned the other direction and went to my parents' house in Oak Ridge, which was a good 15, 17 miles away. And the whole way there, there's a highway there in East Tennessee called Pillsippi Parkway that goes all the way from Oak Ridge to the interstate connector. One way it'll take you to the airport, the other way it takes you to I-40, which is the major east-west thoroughfare through there. And the whole time down Pillsippi Parkway, I'm totally breaking the speed limit. This little car would go, because it was tuned up, and made for speed. And I was easily doing 90 and 100 miles an hour down Pillsippi Parkway just to get away from these weird little girls. And I kept looking in my rearview mirror as I'm driving away, not for the police. The police would have been a welcome sight at this point, but for the little girls. Just that irrational fear was making me think, well, they're going to be right behind the car, or they're hanging on to the spoiler on the back of the car, or, they're going to just appear in the seat. And I look over my shoulder behind me, like they're going to be run along beside the car. And just that type of fear. And when I did get to my parents' house, instead of parking in the driveway as normal, I continued through the driveway around behind their house and parked my car behind their house under a tree in the backyard. Again, no explanation for that kind of behavior. I went and let myself in. Of course, they're long asleep. And I couldn't rest, couldn't go to sleep. I just couldn't get these images in this incident out of my mind. Every little bit, I'd get up and I'd peek out the curtains, I'd go to the kitchen, look out to the kitchen door, and I expected to see those little girls out on the porch. Now, never did, never seen them again. But, again, it's that fear. I relive it now. Every time I tell it, I get my palms sweat, and I get kind of nervous. You probably hear it in my voice. That was the most frightening encounter I've ever had, and it's the fear that it would come back to an extent. Is why I've been reticent to talk about it. And as I've stated, the times that I have talked about it, things have happened. So I don't know what'll happen this time. Again, no explanation, don't know who they were, where they came from, what they were, but I felt a sense of evil, a sense of urgency to get away. It felt very, I would say, demonic in nature. There was a presence there, something bigger than those two little girls. It was whatever was, with them or controlling them, or however you want to say it. There was a definite evil there, something that I didn't want to mess with. And I've been in some pretty hairy situations, but it frightened me to the core, just a fright that I didn't even know I was capable of feeling.
Gosh, that's really frightening.
Yeah, as I said, it's the singular most frightening encounter that I've ever had by far, not including any of those stories from my third book, My Strange World, my personal encounters there. A couple of doozies in there, but this one, there's never been anything even close to the fear that I felt either before or since the encounter with the black-eyed children.
Would you ever want to encounter the black-eyed kids again?
Well, that's an odd question, and I've been asked that by many people that have heard the story, heard me tell it. I haven't committed it to print. I don't know that I ever will write it out. I prefer to just tell it because I don't think I could capture the fear like I do when I'm telling. I've had people tell me that you can hear it in my voice, and I don't know that even as much as I write 4 hours a day, every day, I don't know that I could capture the true feeling that I'm experiencing in there. But, yes and no. I would like to encounter them again. I feel like that I'd be more prepared now, that I would have a better idea that I was dealing with something so far through. Because that was what broadsided me and blindsided me so much, was just that overwhelming fear from somebody who's normally fearless in case of the paranormal. I saw my first full-body apparition around 6 years old. Didn't scare me a bit. It made me curious and set me on a lifetime journey of exploring the paranormal. But had this been my first encounter, I probably wouldn't have wanted anything to do with the paranormal ever again for my entire life. So yeah, a part of me would like to see them again, and another part of me sort of fears that I will see them again, especially after talking about it like this.
Wow, you must be so scared.
Oh yeah, I was, and I don't have any trouble admitting it. None whatsoever. It was a very frightening, very harrowing experience, and even that night, I couldn't sleep till after daylight. I kept peering out the curtains, and I even called into my other job and didn't go to work that day. I did finish up at the breast center, but the last couple times that I had to go in there and do some things, I tried to go earlier than usual, and actually took a girlfriend at the time with me. And nothing happened. Never saw the black-eyed kids again.
Okay, Steve. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Tanya. Love talking to you about it, telling the story. Yet again, it does seem to get a little easier every time I tell it, so we'll see what happens.
Please keep us updated if you have any more goings on while talking about this stuff.
Oh, I certainly will. You'll be the first to know, Tanya. Thanks again for asking me to be on to talk about it.
Yes, thank you very much again for joining us here and sharing your experience